You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look me better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Deku Meets Teen Wolf. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of D3 Miles art on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. A massive headache quickly formed in his head and he had to walk out to have a single thought. As he closed the door behind him he noticed the cats began to calm down. He thought about heading back in to feed them, but then he heard a worried knock on the front door. He quickly walked to the front and saw Momo Yaoyorozu standing outside. Her hair was wet and clung to her face, and matched her watery eyes. Izuku walked over to the door and opened it. Before he could get a word out, Momo said, "It happened so fast. I was changing the song on my headphones, then before I knew it I hit it." She began to cry so Izuku said, "What exactly did you hit?" "A dog." Momo forced out before she took a shallow breath. "Can you tell me where it is, so I can call animal control?" Izuku said, putting a reassuring hand on Momo's shoulder. It's right down the street on the corner." Momo said through tries. Izuku nodded, it was close, he could handle it. Momo led him to the street corner. When they followed a dog on the ground, as they approached it, it raised its head and tried to bite Momo. Momo jumped back and let a small cry escape her lip. "It's okay. It's just scarried," Izuku said, as he saw that was the main emotion within the dog's eyes. "That makes two of us," Momo said, taking another step back. "Let's see if I have any better luck," Izuku said, as he crouched down to be eye level with the dog. The dog locked eyes with Izuku then looked as if it was going to bark, but then it lowered its head and began to whimper. Izuku smiled and reached forwards and scratched the dog's head. "See, they need to know that they can trust us and that we trust them." Izuku scooped the dog up and carried it back to the clinic, where he took the dog to the back and placed it on a metal table, then looked the dog over for injury. He heard Momo walk in, so he said, "She's just got a broken leg. I've seen the doctor do them before, so I can do it myself, then give her a painkiller for now. No collar, I'll have a look around tomorrow, call the owner when I do." Momo nodded, so Izu grabbed a gauze wrap then walked back over to the dog. He set the bone the best he could, then began to wrap the dog's legs in the gauze. After a few minutes it was completely wrapped and the dog seemed to relax. Izuku then looked over at Momo and noticed her wet clothes. While he tried hard to not look at how her shirt hugged her curves, he said, "We have some extra uniform shirts." "No, I don't want to bother you any further," Momo said, as she chewed a bit on her nail before stopping. "It's no issue," Izuku said as he walked over to a floor-to-ceiling cabinet and pulled out a maroon shirt. "Here." Izuku tossed Momo the shirt, "You can change in one of the empty rooms." Momo caught the shirt and said, "Thank you." She left to get change, while Izuku walked back to the dog. The dog lifted its head, looked towards the door Momo had just walked out, then back at Izuku and licked his face. "Oh, shut up," Izuku said, then fed the dog the painkiller he had grabbed from the cabinet. "I'm not going to look." Momo returned shortly afterwards, brushing her hair. Izuku was confused where she got the comb from. "Thank you, but you really didn't have to do that," Momo said, but she was happy to have a dry shirt on. "It's no problem," Izuku said, as he scratched the dog's head. "It's just that I feel like an idiot," Momo said, as she sat down on a stool. "It's okay, it was an accident," Izuku said, remember all the time he practically did first aid on himself to cover up the burns he had. Those times weren't accidents, but this was. I don't know, maybe because I freaked out like a total girl. I'm training to be a pro hero, but I can't handle accidentally running into a dog. Momo said, as she continued to brush her hair. Well, you are a girl, so I think you're allowed to, you're training to be a pro hero. Izuku said, as he sat down across from Momo. He had to rein himself from freaking out. Well, I don't want to follow in my father's footsteps, and with my quirk, I thought I could become a pro hero. But with how I just acted like a girly girl, maybe not. Momo said. Yeah, everyone has a bad day. You just moved and it was your first day at a new school. Izuku said. How did you? Momo said, then finally realized who she was talking to, Midoriya. Izuku blushed that a girl as appealing as Momo would remember her name, in the flesh. He said before he said anything embarrassing. Small world, I guess. I saw you at practice, I don't know lacrosse, but you handled yourself pretty well. Momo said, as she rubbed her arm a bit to warm up. How could a boy that seems as sweet as Izuku be called a troublemaker? Well, I trained over the summer. Though that was my first time as goalie, coach wanted to see how I would do. Izuku said, as he went back to rubbing the dog's head, so you said you wanted to be a pro hero, you must have an amazing quirk. Momo beamed a bit with light and said, it's nice to have. I struggled in the beginning to control it. Is it hard to do so? Control it, I mean. Izuku said. Maybe control isn't the best word, it's not like I have super strength. Maybe use or understand would be better. Momo said as she began scratching the dog's head too. Doing so, Momo heard her heart rate drop a bit and her shoulder relaxed. How so? Izuku asked. He enjoyed seeing new quirk and what the possibilities of them were. Well, I can transform the lipids in my body into inorganic materials and create an object, but to do so I need to know the atom structure of the object. Momo said, then was taken back when Izuku suddenly pulled out a notebook and began writing. Momo watched for a bit, then recognized the notebook as the same one Izuku had been drawing in at school. What are you writing? Izuku paused for a second, then looked up at her. Oh, sorry, I take notes about quirks that I find cool and I've never heard of one that's like yours. Oh, I remember you drawing Mount Lady in science. Momo said, remember how detailed Izuku's drawing was. She still wanted to ask if that dealt with his quirk. Well, she's a new pro hero that debuted only early this year, so I have new stuff to add every day. Izuku said, embarrassing Momo had seen his drawing. He hadn't let anyone seen them before, not even his mother. Well, I think it looked lovely, very realistic. I guess you have a lot of practice. Momo said. Well, I've been making notes since I was a kid. I've always wanted to be a pro hero. Izuku said, in a solemn voice. Do you no longer want to be a pro hero? Sorry, it's just you sounded sad when you said you always wanted to be a pro hero. Is your quirk not suited for it? Momo asked. Izuku didn't answer but moved back to the cabinet as if to grab something. Momo heard something shaking, then a hiss of air being released. Momo then noticed Izuku looked a bit more relaxed, but stress was still evident in his body language. Midoriya, are you okay? Momo said, standing up from the table, causing the dog to start whining again. Momo walked over to Izuku and raised a hand to put on his shoulder. Please don't. Izuku softly said, causing Momo to pause, then withdraw her hand. Is your quirk a topic that you don't like talking about? Momo asked, as she took a small step back. Izuku put his hands on the counter and Momo saw a small device in his right hand. She recognized it as an inhaler. Is that why my question? You have asthma. Izuku didn't enjoy talking about his quirk, or the lack of one, or his asthma, but if he had to choose one he preferred to talk about his asthma. As long as it kept Momo from asking about his quirk. Yes, growing up I always wanted to be a hero, but when I was diagnosed with asthma my chances practically became zero. I take notes in hope of becoming a scientist that specializes in quirks. Oh. Momo said. Izuku's goal of becoming a scientist was an admirable goal, as though quirks had been there for many generations. Deciphering the genetic markers of quirk was still being researched. Midoriya, do you have a phone I can use? Mine broke when I fell over. Izuku took a deep breath then said, there's a phone in the front desk you can use. I'll walk you to it. What about the dog? Momo asked. She'll live, just hope she doesn't sue. I'll put her in bed for the night, Izuku said, getting a small laugh out of Momo. Izuku walked over and gently lifted the dog off the table and carried her to a bed in the back, with Momo following him. Once the dog was settled down, Izuku walked Momo to the front room and pulled out the phone. Momo thanked Izuku then tapped in her mom's phone number. It quickly picked up, hey it's Momo. I'm fine, just got into a bit of an accident. I ran into a dog and knocked it over. We're both fine, there was a veterinarian down the street. My phone broke when I fell over, I'm calling you from the veterinarian's phone. Momo paused, then looked over at Izuku, my mom needs the address. Momo pointed the phone away from her mouth so as to pick up Izuku's voice. It's 21575, Moonlight Avenue. Izuku said. Did you get that? Momo asked, that was one of the workers. MOM. Momo screamed then slammed the phone down, oh sorry. It's okay. I can guess what your mom said. Izuku said, as he had had many conversations with his mom that ended like that. My mom is coming to pick me up, she'll be here shortly. Momo said. Izuku nodded and said, you can have a seat while you wait. Momo nodded and walked out to the reception area and took a chair. Izuku sat down behind the desk and looked for something to do, but he had done all Dr. Asa wrote down. Finally he looked up at Momo and asked, Yaoyorozu, I was wondering, is it really a family night on Friday? Momo dropped her head and said, no, family night was a total lie. Izuku took a long breath and then asked, then would you like to go to the party with me? Izuku was sweet and seemed like genuinely nice gentleman, the total opposite from the boys from her old school. Boys that her father had to chase off, something Momo herself had gotten really good at. Momo began to answer, but then headlights filled the office and a small horn went off. Momo quickly jumped up and walked to the door. However, as she began to open it, she stopped then turned around, Midoriya. I would like to go to the party with you. Izuku nodded, allowing Momo to walk out. As soon as the door closed, Izuku's knees went weak, causing him to fall. He hit the edge of the chair, pushing it back and allowing him to fall to the ground. Izuku couldn't believe he had just asked a girl out to a party, especially one as appealing as Momo Yaoyorozu. The headlight pulled backwards and left the parking lot, giving Izuku a moment of clarity. He sat on the floor for a bit longer, then he stood up and locked the front door. It was time for him to go home and get some rest, he had a long week ahead of him. Izuku quickly checked all the exterior doors and windows, then walked outside and went home. At home he took a cold shower, then changed into a pair of pajama shorts then hopped in bed. He laid his head on his pillow and looked up through his window at the moon, its light bathing his room. This day hadn't gone the way he was expecting, but that wasn't a bad thing. He had spent his entire life living with no direction, but maybe in this last semester of middle school that could change. Momo seemed interested in him, or she wouldn't have accepted his offer. Maybe he could keep his quirkless secret a bit longer, but eventually she would learn. Izuku shook his head to get that thought out of his head, he would deal with it when he came across the bridge. Izuku closed his eyes to go to sleep and roll onto his side. However, his mattress became wet and stiff, and it felt like something was poking him in his ribs. Izuku quickly shot up and looked around him. He was no longer in his room, his rooms had walls, his current locations did not. It was foggy around him, but Izuku could see trees all around him. Izuku shook his head but his vision stayed the same. Telling him he wasn't dreaming about being in a forest, he actually was. Izuku quickly stood up, using a fallen tree to brace himself on. The cold wet ground covered in leaves made Izuku shivered a bit. He was confused about how he could have gotten out here. Izuku took another look around, his eyes passing a dark figure. Izuku's eyes shot back to the dark figure, it was the same one from the night before. This time however it was on all fours and staring directly at Izuku. Izuku took a hallowed breath, then the next second he took off in the opposite direction. Izuku could hear the creature, or whatever it was following him. Its feet, paws shook the ground as it ran. Izuku knew he couldn't slow down, or the creature would easily catch up to him. He willed his legs to move faster, not noticing he was running faster than he had ever before. Trees whipped past as Izuku ran for his dear life. He might not have done a lot with his life and might never really got to. But his conversation with Momo gave him hope that his life would get better. Izuku looked over his shoulder to see if he had last seen the creature, only to feel his feet miss the ground. Izuku's eyes became dinner plates, as he looked forwards and found him falling into a stream. His head went underwater, and he had to stop himself from taking a breath. He kicked as hard as he could and shortly afterwards, his head broke the surface of the water. He took a long breath, before remembering the creature, causing him to look around in the forest but he couldn't find the creature. Izuku shook his head, and his vision changed. He was no longer in the forest, or swimming in a stream. He was in a pool and found an elderly gentleman watering his flower. Izuku wiped the water off his face and smiled, "Good morning." The elderly gentleman gave a small wave. Izuku nodded, then quickly swam out of the pool and began walking to the gate. As he reached the gate, he opened it then quickly took off running to get home. When he got home Izuku realized he had 45 minutes to get to school. In a panic he threw on a shirt, changed into a pair of pants, grabbed his backpack and took off to school. He would have to worry about fixing his bike tire when he got home. At school, Izuku ran into his first PRD, economics, just as the bell rang. He sat down in the back as usual and did his best to pay attention. However, his morning was still fresh in his mind. He was still confused of how he could have woken up in a pool. He wasn't known to sleepwalk. Izuku thought about this throughout school, but fortunately once school was out, Izuku could distract himself with lacrosse practice. Without his bike all of his teammates easily rode past him, laughing as they did. Izuku was the last one to show up to practice. Izuku walked over to the changing rooms and changed. Izuku then walked out as he adjusted his knee pads. As he stood up, he was suddenly thrown into the wall. Izuku had hit the wall and his mind momentarily went white. Once his mind cleared, he saw Bakugo hold him against the wall with one hand. Bakugo's other hand was pulled back ready to unleash an explosion. "Alright you DMN nerd, why don't you tell me where you're getting your juices? Tell me the truth, then I'll finally be able to get you kicked off this team." Normally Izuku would want to curl up into a ball, but something made him hold his ground. Yet he was still confused. "What? Where are you getting your juice?" Bakugo repeated his question, a small explosion starting from his free hand. "I don't know what you're talking about, my mom does all the grocery shopping." Izuku answered as the smell of caramel filled his nose. He never realized Bakugo's quirk gave off such a strong scent. "Now, listen, Deku, you're going to tell me exactly who you're buying from because there is no way a quirkless nobody like you could have stopped all those goals yesterday. You're going to tell me, then I'll tell the coach." Bakugo said, lighting off a small explosion. "Oh, you mean steroids?" Izuku said. Izuku and Bakugo had known each since they were kids and at one point were friends. So how could Bakugo ever question that Izuku would do something as immoral as steroids? "Yes you idiot, what else could you be on?" Bakugo said, pulling Izuku away from the wall and slamming him into the wall again. "Or have you been lying this entire time? You've had a quirk this entire time, but you've played the weak Deku, just waiting for the perfect moment to show me up. Is that what is going on?" "No, it isn't. I'm still quirkless and I always will be. You want to know, well so would I. I don't know what's going on, but I feel like I'm going out of my freaking mind. Izuku said, as he felt some anger build up in his chest. He had spent years as Bakugo's punching bag, and though nothing had really changed, Izuku had a sense he no longer had to be. Bakugo scoffed and dropped Izuku to the floor. One way or another, I'll learn the truth. I don't care how long it takes, and then you'll be kicked off the team and I won't have to deal with you anymore, Deku. Bakugo then kicked Izuku in the guts, then promptly turned and left. Izuku struggled to catch his breath. Once he could take a deep breath, he slowly picked himself off the ground. He brushed his hair out of his face and slowly walked out to practice. Midoriya. Midoriya, wait up. Kei yelled as he came running over to Izuku. Hey, can it wait? I'm playing the first elimination, can it wait? Izuku said, as Coach Yuto blew his whistle. Just hold on, okay? I overheard my dad on the phone. Call came from Toyoko. Fiber analysis came from the body they found in the woods. They found animal hairs on the body. Kei said in a panicked tone. Izuku walked away. Kei, I got to go. Wait, no, Midoriya. You're not gonna believe what animal it was. Kei said, raising his arms up, but Izuku walked out of ear range. Kei sighed, dropping his hands onto his head. They found wolf hair. It was a wolf. Izuku got into the huddle, but made sure to be on the opposite side of Bakugo. Alright, you've all had a day to warm up, so practice starts for real today. You all know how this goes. If you don't make the cut, you'll most likely be sitting on the bench for the rest of the season. But if you do, you get to play. Make your parents proud, show off your skill, get some extra points with your girlfriends. Everything else is rice. Coach Yuto said, then blew his whistle. Alright, let's see what you've got. Izuku stayed quiet while everyone else cheered. Izuku quietly moved to the right wing position and waited for the whistle. As he waited, he saw Bakugo move to be center right defender, which was unusual as he was usually center attacker. Coach Yuto put the lacrosse ball down in the middle of the field and raised the whistle to his lips, causing everyone to become focused. With the blow of the whistle, the game had started. Izuku's team had managed to win the break and get the ball first, and get it to their center forwards. However, Bakugo quickly descended on them and knocked the ball out of their pocket. As the players stumbled to the ground, Bakugo smoothly swipes the ball out of the air and flicker across the field to his own team's center attacker. Come on, that was weak. Bakugo yelled as he looked down as the teammates he had made fell to the ground. He then turned to glare at Izuku. Izuku did his best to ignore him and moved to help defend his goal. His team worked well to get the ball back and passed it to their goalie. The goalie swooped it up and looked around the field. Most of Izuku's team was in their own territory, except for Izuku, as he was right on the midfield line. Normally no one would dare pass to Izuku, but maybe because of how well he had done yesterday, the goalie pointed at Izuku and then threw the ball. Izuku froze as the goalie pointed at him and then threw the ball. Izuku had to take a few steps back as the goalie threw the ball a little hard. Izuku caught the lacrosse ball in the pocket of his stick, then immediately turned around and began judging it to the goal. He still had the opponent's center defender. However, as Izuku got close, he noticed his opponent didn't seem too stressed about getting the ball back. Then Izuku remembered the unspoken rule. It was rare for Izuku to have the ball in his possession, but every time he did, it was always Bakugo that was the one to take it from him. Something Bakugo made sure happened, as he scared off anyone that tried to defend Izuku. Izuku could hear footsteps right behind him, then he felt something attack his stick. Izuku's stick was knocked down, then up and out of his hand, while an elbow was rammed into his jaw. Izuku fell to the ground, hitting his head, but getting a clear enough view of Bakugo catching the ball again. He tossed into the air mocking Izuku while he said, "You shouldn't have played Deku." Bakugo then turned and began working the ball to Izuku's goal. Izuku took a bit to catch his breath and get his hit from bussing, a clear sign that what Bakugo had done was a penalty, but like at school, Bakugo was never called out for breaking the rule. As Izuku finally sat up, he heard Coach Yuto blow his whistle and Bakugo and his team cheering. Izuku looked over his shoulder and saw Bakugo sliding across the grass, then Coach Yuto walked into his field of vision. I know you can be a good player, sports is the one place you have a level playing field. Coach Yuto said, as he crouched next to Izuku, show them what you've got. Izuku stood up and brushed off his knees. Coach Yuto blew his whistle and said, all right, change positions. Bakugo and Midoriya will break. Izuku signed as he walked to his new position, Bakugo bumping his shoulder as they walked past each other. Izuku's goalie threw Coach Yuto the ball and he placed it in the center of the field, on my whistle. Izuku and Bakugo both crouched down and held their sticks ready to swoop the ball on. Coach Yuto then moved off the field and raised his whistle to his mouth. And blew. Before anyone else had a chance to move, Izuku swooped the ball off the ground. Then shoulder-checked Bakugo, causing him to fall to the ground. Then everyone began to move, the defender moved to stop Izuku, but he was too fast for them. He juked the first one, jumped the second one and shoulder-checked the third one. This left Izuku with a clear shot to the goal, where the goalie waited for him. Izuku feinted to go to the top right corner, but went to the bottom left. He shot the ball and it bounced in off the side beam. Izuku took a breath as he realized what he had just done. Everyone on and off the field stood still for a second, as the lacrosse ball hit the net and stretched it to its full length. Worse yet, there was so much force still within the ball, it threatened to blow through the net and keep on going. Eventually the ball slowed back and the net was able to bring it back into the net. Let's go Midoriya. Coach Yuto was the first one to yell, and after that other people began to yell his name. His teammates began to run over to Izuku to congratulate him, except for Bakugo and the one who should have been doing it, K. K was just looking at the lacrosse ball that was sitting on the goal. He should have been down on the field, congratulating his friend and what he was going to do, but then his joke from yesterday came back into his mind. Lycanthropy, it was a joke that was all it was supposed to be. A dumb joke to poke fun at his best friend for thinking of crazy things, to get back at him. Yet Izuku Midoriya wasn't that kind of person. Sure, he and Kei messed with each other, but that wasn't Izuku's style. Then there was the improved skills, reflexes and speed. Kei walked away from the bench, but not in the direction of Izuku. No, Kei walked towards the hanging room, where he grabbed his backpack, got on his bike and then went home. He needed an answer. Once home, with his father off work, Kei was distraction-free to do some research. Beginning with his library of books, Kei pulled out the different books he had about legends, myths, supernatural animals. And he had combed through all of that. Kei switched to his computer. Many of the search results talk about how supernatural things could have been early signs of quirks appearing and how quirks had created new myths. Yet Kei wasn't looking for that. So after filtering through all of that, he came across an old website. It solely talked about legends, myths and supernatural animals, not bringing up quirks once. Kei looked up werewolves and found a section about lycans. Once the page loaded, Kei began reading it. Lycans, commonly known as werewolves, are a myth about supernatural wolves that began in 1000 BC in the Epic of Gilgamesh. But modern-day werewolves did not appear until later, the height of the Greek Empire. In 425 BC, Greek historian Herodotus described a tribe of men who used wolf fur and skin to cover themselves during the winter time. During the time that the story was placed around that, the transformation was changed to be a more physical transformation rather than a statement of fashion. Kei began to skip down the page until the words, ways of transformation, caught his eyes. Throughout history, the ways one became a lycan have changed. Each way originates in different parts of the world and only a few have known origins. We have the previously mentioned one, and then one from Socrates said, he who tastes of the bit of human entrails minced up with those of other victims is inevitably transforming into a wolf. This is believed to go along with the philosophical nature of ancient Greece. You think therefore you are. Meaning from Socrates' words, it states that it was believed that if a man were to act like a wolf he would eventually transform into one. Another belief of lycan transformation comes from a passage from Plato's. He tells of a story of King Lycaon, that to prove Zeus's weakness, King Lycaon's son murdered their youngest brother. Then when Zeus came to visit their father, the boys served Zeus a feast that contained the body of their brother. However, Zeus learned of their crimes, and to punish them he killed them with a lightning bolt and then transformed their father into a wolf. Another philosopher, Ovid, told a different version of Plato's story. The major difference being Ovid provides a more detailed section of how Lycaon's body was transformed, and that provides the for werewolf transforms in modern-day stories. Kay continued reading late into the night. More ways of transforming were provided. Being bitten by a werewolf, drinking water from the paw print of werewolf. People selling their souls to the devil, or divine punishment from God. And as history moved, the transformation of a lyco was no longer set for months but set for the days leading up to and the days after a full moon. As Tuesday turned into Wednesday and then Thursday, Kay switched his search of the history of werewolves to the different ways they were killed. It wasn't until it was 6:17 on the Friday morning, when Kay finally grabbed his phone and dialed Izuku's number. After a bit of arguing, Kay convinced Izuku to come over before school started. 45 minutes before school started, Izuku arrived. Kay grabbed Izuku and rushed him into his room. After nearly throwing Izuku onto his bed, Kay sat down at his desk. As he looked at his best friend, his knee began to bounce as he tried to organize his thoughts. "Alright, I've been up all night, reading book, websites. Everything I can find." Kay began, trying to contain all of his thoughts as it felt like there was a million happening all at once. Izuku noticed a bottle on Kay's desk, he pointed to it and asked, "How much Adderall did you take?" Izuku wished Kay didn't forego his health stuff like this. Kay looked over his shoulder at the bottle, then back over at Izuku. "So what if that was a new bottle 2 days ago? This was important and it had to be done, doesn't matter. Just listen. Did your dad and his team find who the body was, or something?" Izuku said. Kay gave a confused look. "What? No, they're still questioning people. Even Kuram Takeo. If it was that, I wouldn't have waited for you to get here. I would have come for you. Know this about that joke the other day. Do you remember it? You make a lot of jokes." Izuku clarified. Kay shook his head back and forth in a mocking manner to show he knew what his best friend meant. After lacrosse practice, Izuku shook his head like an apathy. "Not a joke anymore." Izuku shook his head again. "The wolf, the bite in the woods. So I started researching it. Do you even know why wolves howl?" "No." Izuku shook his head. Kay let out a sigh, as if it should have been common knowledge. "It's to signal their location to their pack, okay? When a wolf is alone it will howl, and when the pack howls back it can know where to find its pack. So if you heard a wolf howling, it could mean that there's more around. You think that there is a pack of wolves in Japan?" Izuku said, standing up and looking at Kay like he needed help. "You're the one that heard a wolf howl in the woods. And not just a pack of wolves, a pack of werewolves," Kay said, defending himself. "I don't know what I heard." Izuku said, his voice getting a bit hot-blooded. "Are you seriously wasting my time with this? I have a lot going on today and I'd rather you not try to distract me." Izuku began moving towards the door, but Kay grabbed his shoulder and held him back. "Midoriya, just hold on. I saw what you've been doing on the field all week. It wasn't just amazing, it's impossible. You've taken hits from Bakugo that would normally spend you to the bench, but you've walked them off like he might have just slapped you." Kay said. "So what, I've made a few good plays," Izuku said, trying to make his way to the door again, but Kay stopped him. He was finally having a chance to live a life that could be seen as good, and Kay, who should be happy for him, was stopping him from doing so. "No, they were more than just good, they were nearly perfect. You trained all of summer, but for it to suddenly kick in, it doesn't happen. And I mean, look at the way you move, your reflexes. The fact you could smell a month-old gum in my pocket," Kay said, holding Izuku back in surprise that Izuku felt like a brick wall. "That gum was a month old and you still chewed it," Izuku said, turning a little more green than usual. Do you know how much preservatives are in gum? Whatever that, besides the point, and I don't think I need to point out that you aren't using your inhaler anymore. You've been stressed the entire week, I've noticed, and not once have I seen you use your inhaler, nor have you wheezed once. Kei said. He cared about his friend, he noticed things about his friend, and now he was worried about his friend. Okay. So what, maybe my quirk finally came in. Izuku said, anything to get out of Kei's presence. All this joking, it was making his blood boil a bit. Dude, you and I are practically brothers, so we both know despite how badly you want something like that to happen, it never will, you said it yourself. We gain quirks was kids so our body can grow to handle them, suddenly gaining a quirk, the power would backfire on the user. And why would it be a wolf quirk? Your family history doesn't have anything like that, I would know. I took a look. Kei said. So what, I can't think about this right now. Like I said, I have a lot going on right now and I'd rather not be distracted. Izuku said, we'll talk tomorrow. Tomorrow, no. The full moon is tonight and it wouldn't just be a physical change. The moon heightens a werewolf bloodlust. Kei said, sitting down, I'm just trying to help. Bloodlust? Izuku questioned. Your urge to kill. It's also affected but pulse, blood pressure, we both know what a large crowd does to you. Going to this party will be an extremely bad choice, because... Kei sighed, you're cursed, Izuku. You have to cancel your date. Izuku lunged at Kei, grabbing his shirt, lifting him up and slamming him against the wall. He had a chance to have a friend outside of Kei, a girlfriend at that, and with someone as appealing as Momo, he wasn't going to risk that. The only thing raising my blood pressure is you. I'm not canceling my date with Yaoyorozu, for once I had a chance to make something of my life and I think you would be happy. You're my only friend. Izuku said as his eyes began to glow yellow. Izuku punched Kei's chair, knocking it over, and then like that his anger was gone. Midoriya, I'm happy for you. What I won't give to be you on the date with Yaoyorozu. A girl as appealing as her, hell, I would probably be willing to fight All Might for a chance like that, but you and I have always been honest with each other and ourselves. So I ask you to look at yourself through the day, and if 1 second you start to believe me, find it in yourself to call Yaoyorozu and cancel that date. Kei said. Izuku growled as he walked over to Kei's bed and grabbed his backpack. I'll see you at school. Izuku left Kei's house angry for the first time, and that anger didn't disappear as he biked to school. He had a long day ahead of him and he just wanted to get through it. School was completely different from what it usually was. Izuku and Kei didn't speak to each other once, while Momo spoke with Izuku any chance she had. They discussed how they would get to the party, deciding since Izuku's house was closer, Momo's dad would drop her off and then they would walk over. The day went fine until last PRD. The one PRD Izuku had with Kago where neither Momo or Kei were in class. Izuku kept his head down, focusing on getting through the day and not wanting to get into any fight. And it seemed he was in the clear until the bell rang and Bakugo decided to blow off some steam. Hey Deku, I don't know what the hell you think you've been doing this week, but you better knock it off. Because it won't be long until the truth comes out, then you'll be kicked off the team. Bakugo said, as he swiped Izuku's notebook from his hands, and what's this, you think by writing about others' quirk you'll get your own? Hey, give that back. Izuku said, standing up and trying to take his notebook back. Why don't we see what you've been daydreaming about now? Bakugo said, as he flipped the notebook over to the open page, and just by Izuku's luck he had been working on Momo's page. Ha! You think you've got a chance with Ms. Aichi, she's far out of your league. Bakugo laughed and his goons behind him joined in as if they had heard the greatest joke in the world. That's what Izuku was to them, a great big joke that never got old and was always funny. Well, we're going to the lacrosse party tonight. Izuku said, his voice timid despite all that he tried to show confidence. What, she said, Fridays are family nights. Bakugo said, then growled and unleashed an explosion from his hand, burning the notebook. I'd better not see you at that party tonight, or your butt is mine. And if you think you can bring ms look at me, then I'll personally send your butt to hell. You're both layers and you aren't coming to my party. The party is for the whole team, you don't. Izuku said, but then Bakugo unleashed another explosion. Be lucky I find you unworthy of my quirk, or I will cream you right now. Izuku knew it was because they were still in a classroom. You're just a worthless, quirkless, asthmatic Deku that will never be a pro hero. Your best bet is to jump off the roof and hope for a better quirk in your next life. Bakugo said, then closed the notebook and got prepared to throw out the open window. I'll give you an example. Bakugo then chucked the notebook towards the open window, but suddenly Izuku's arm reached out and snatched it out of midair. Bakugo and the two goons behind him were caught off guard by this, more so when Izuku slowly raised his chin and growled. You think you're so tough? Bakugo said after quickly regaining his composure. He let off a third explosion and that seemed to make Izuku back off. Ha! You'll never be a hero. With that Bakugo turned around and walked out of the room, his two goons following him. Izuku gave them a large berth to disappear, looking down at his notebook as he waited. As he looked over his notebook he noticed that there were some punctures in it. Dismissing those, he slipped his notebook back into his backpack and began walking to his bike. Only to find out that not only were the tires cutting, they were straight up missing. Not wanting to have to deal with that, or carry his bike home, Izuku left it chained to the bike rake and began walking homing. As Izuku walked home, he pulled out his notebook and looked over it to see what the damage was. Luckily only a few pages had been burnt. Most of the damage was to the cover. Unfortunately, since it had been opened to Momo's page, he had lost most of that information. Yet he practically had it memorized so he could just write it back down. Izuku absent-mindedly walked under an overpass that he would normally bike over. As he walked he heard the sound of footsteps coming from a manhole. Two pairs, the first sounded like it was gliding more than running, while the second pair far behind the first were thunderous. As both sounds pierced Izuku's skull, he failed to notice the manhole cover blow up into the air and a pile of green slime carrying out. I didn't know he was going to be in town. If I had, I would have never robbed that bank today. The green slime growed a pair of eyes that locked on Izuku. Ah, perfect, a skin suit. Izuku regained control of his consciousness as he felt slime crawling over his body. The cold sensation of the slime, the tightness as it coiled around his legs, and the dread he got from what was about to happen. He noticed it getting close to his mouth, so he immediately shut it. Don't mind me, I'm just going to borrow your body to hide. I don't want that blonde hair freak show to find me. The slime said, but then it ran into Izuku's closed mouth. Just open up and I don't have to hurt you. Izuku smartly didn't answer but just shook his head. The slime covered his entire lower body and started to pin his arm. Izuku thrashed around trying to free himself, to grip and pull the slime off, but nothing he did worked and he was stuck. Your weak body isn't going to be able to do anything to stop me. So you might as well just give up and do what I want. It will be less painful if you cooperate. The slime villain said. Izuku continued to keep his mouth closed, so the slime villain wrapped his hand around Izuku's neck and began to squeeze. Eventually you'll have to breathe and then I'll have no issue getting in. Izuku knew the villain was right, and continued to try and get a hold of the villain's body. I told you, you won't be able to get a grip. The slime villain chuckled. Switching tactics and with his vision staring to close in, Izuku ran at the wall, trying to knock the slime villain off of him. However, the slime villain moved his body out of the way, resulting in Izuku slamming his own body against the wall. This resulted in the air being forced out of his lung and Izuku opening his mouth. Haha, my way in. The slime villain said and started to force himself inside Izuku's body. Izuku struggled to breath as slime started to enter his mouth and travel down his throat. He tried to grab the slime, bite the slime and even close his mouth again, but nothing worked. His body started to grow cold from the slime and the dread began piercing. Izuku began to panic as his brain realized it wasn't getting proper oxygen, his heart rate quickly climbing to match his panic. His vision was almost completely black, as Izuku suddenly felt angry, rage building up in his chest. Izuku tried to calm himself, he could think better if he stayed calm, but his rage didn't disappear, then suddenly the slime stopped moving within his throat. I told you it's pointless. You can't fight. The slime villain said, then he looked down and saw that Izuku's eyes were glowing yellow. The slime villain tried as hard as he couldn't move more of his body within Izuku's throat. It felt like something was pushing against him. Izuku felt his rage build in his body until it reached a boiling point, and then slime within his throat and mouth began to move backwards, out of his body. Once the last piece of slime was ejected from Izuku's mouth, he let out an animalistic roar. It was strong enough to shake the overpass and make some cement dust fall down. The slime villain was thrown against the other wall, and when he looked up, Izuku's eyes were glowing a more bright yellow and he had fangs in his mouth. He crouched down and roared at the slime villain, his nails slowly turning in claws as he did so. The slime villain picked himself up and with a yell charged Izuku, thinking Izuku couldn't do anything. The slime villain was mistaken as Izuku swiped his claws forwards and cut the villain's slime body in pieces. Izuku let out a victory roar, but then the manhole cover blew off the ground again. Have no fear, citizens. Izuku recognized the voice and the catchphrase, his fangs, claws and yellow disappeared as a hulking figure stepped out of the manhole. Why? Because I am here. No. The slime villain said, as he tried to piece himself back together to run, but All Might drew his fist. Texas Smash. All Might punched forwards and the wind generated by his punch shot forwards and blew the slime villain into a million pieces. All Might looked around to see the damage and was surprised to see a young boy standing in the middle of the carnage, but he looked relatively unharmed. Was it he that let out the animalistic roars, which had drawn All Might in the correct direction? All Might's attention was drawn back to the slime villain as he was trying to rebuild himself. Thinking quickly, All Might grabbed 2 soda bottles and used it to store most of the villain's body. As All Might put the bottles into his pocket, the boy began to stir like he was coming back to consciousness. The boy looked at All Might and All Might could see stars appeared in his eyes. Oh my gosh, oh my god, you're All Might. The boy said, then pulled out a notebook and then held it and bowed as he was trying to try under the notebook. Can I have your autograph? Ha, I'm always happy to sign stuff for fans. All Might said. He took the notebook and quickly flipped to an empty, clean page. As All Might signed the page, he tried not to think about how burnt the book was. Once he was finished, he tossed the book back to the boy and asked, "What's your name?" "Izukumidoriya." Izuku named himself as he looked at the All Might signature, then began bowing. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This will become family heirloom. Ha, ha. All Might laughed but couldn't help but think that was a little much, even by his standard. Now if you excuse, I need to get this villainous slime to the police. Wait, you're leaving. Hold on, can I ask you a question? Izuku said, but All Might was already preparing to jump away. An animalistic instinct flared up in Izuku's mind, his body subconscious ran forwards and grabbed a hold of All Might's leg as he jumped away. He was high into the air, when All Might felt pain shot through his leg. Surprised he was feeling pain in his muscle form that wasn't from his stomach, All Might looked down and saw that Izuku had latched himself onto the leg of the symbol of peace. And was able to hold as his claws had stuck to All Might's leg. How in the world is this kid drawing BLD? All Might thought, then said, now young boy, what do you think you are doing? I love the media, but this is a bit far too much for my taste. I will have to ask you to let go. But if I do, then I'll fall. Izuku yelled after looking down and seeing he was high above the street. Oh. All Might said as if the realization just hit him, which it did. Directing the path down to a nearby rooftop, All Might felt his body start to relax. No, it couldn't be happening, not at a time like this. When they landed, Izuku was thrown a bit, but All Might was slightly more concerned with his leg. He held a hand down to the leg and pressed it, pain shot through his leg, and when he withdrew his hand it saw there was BLD on it. All Might looked at Izuku as he brushed the dust off of him. All Might noticed that he seemed alright, but did not look at the fact that standing right in front of the symbol of peace was the second person he had even met that could harm him. How was that possible? All Might looked at the claws that were where the kid's fingernails should be. Those were what had made him bleed. They looked originally enough for a quirk, but whatever they made out of it had hurt the number one hero. "I'm so sorry, All Might," Izuku said, looking up just in time to see All Might transformed into his true form. He froze for a bit as he took everything in Toshinori's true form, his sunken eyes, thin and frail body. Toshinori spat out some blood then gave a small wave. "Ah! You're not All Might, you're an imposter," Izuku said, then looked down at his hand and noticed the claws where his fingernails should be. "And what is going on with my hand?" Toshinori would have laughed over the fact that Izuku seemed more certain about his own quirk, something he should be used to by now, than the fact that All Might had just transformed. If not for the fact that he had just revealed himself to middle schoolers. Oh man, oh man, oh man, OCRP. K was right. Lycanthropy is real and I've got it. It's a full moon and I've got my date with Yaoyorozu. Oh man, OCRP, I have to cancel it and I'll never get another shot with her. What am I going to do? Izuku said, falling down onto his butt and looking at the ground. Wait, All Might. Izuku looked up at Toshinori and got a confused look on his face. You're not All Might. Toshinori laughed as that was the first time he had seen someone have such a massive change in view. I can assure you kid I'm All Might. You know how guys are always flexing at the pool to look buff, my quirk works a bit like that. Toshinori said as he fell to the floor in exhaustion. He hadn't done much day until the slime villain caught his attention, then running through the sewer system. He could do with a cold drink. But All Might is a giant of a person, undefeatable and is always winning with a smile on his face. Izuku said as he looked over at Toshinori. How could the skeleton of a man be the symbol of strength and peace? I can assure you that there is a lot of fear behind that smile. Toshinori said as he looked over at Izuku. Now it was just two helplessly confused males sitting on a roof looking at each other, neither of them saying anything. What's lycanthropy? Toshinori asked at the same time Izuku asked, can I ask you a question? Izuku flinched at Toshinori's question. He had overheard Izuku and that didn't sit well with Izuku. If he really was a werewolf, then maybe the less people that knew the better. Toshinori chuckled at the jumble of words so he allowed Izuku to ask his question properly. Can someone without a quirk or with a cursed quirk become a hero like you? Izuku said, looking down at his hands. The claws were still there, meaning he couldn't deny it anymore. Even with the crazy situation he was in, All Might not being All Might, he wasn't having a psychotic break and hallucinating. Toshinori thought about Izuku's question. Anyone could become a hero if they trained hard enough. Sure, some quirk were better suited for fighting, but all quirk were powerful. As for no quirk, there was no way the human would be able to withstand the training and exertion that would be needed to balance the scales. What about a cursed quirk? Toshinori heard people refer to quirk as good or evil, heroic or villains, but not as cursed. Some people with mutant quirk called their quirk a curse, but Izuku seemed to refer to a magic curse. Well, for someone without a quirk, I would say it is nigh impossible. Their body won't be able to withstand the training to keep up with their fellow heroes, and as for a cursed quirk, I've never heard someone refer to it in the way you just did. Toshinori said. Izuku sighed, All Might. The number one hero in Japan, the world. The symbol of peace had just told him that someone without a quirk would never have a realistic chance of becoming a hero. Yet maybe he wasn't quirkless anymore. Izuku looked down at his right hand, his fingers were still claws. They look like werewolves. Hey, your eyes just glowed yellow. Toshinori said, and now it's gone. Izuku watched as his claws returned to normal fingernails. Yep, he was a werewolf. This wasn't just a quirk. Kei had stated Izuku's family didn't have anything like this. It won't make sense. This wasn't a dream, or else he was in a coma for having such a long and detailed dream. This wasn't a hallucination from the slime villain or a villain act. Izukumidoriya without a shadow of a doubt was a werewolf. Toshinori cleared his throat and asked, "You mentioned lycanthropy, what is that?" Izuku said, Kei was always better at improving an answer, it's a medical condition that might or not might render someone from being about to become a hero. Oh okay. Toshinori said. Was Izuku asking because he had a friend who had it and wanted to become a hero? If it was debilitating then Toshinori would have to say no, despite being a hypocrite, but it was just simple meds then he saw nothing wrong with that. He knew a few pro heroes that got back in the field earlier after an injury by taking painkillers in the morning. I'm sorry to take up your time, All Might. I didn't mean to, thank you for answering my question. Izuku said as he picked himself up. Toshinori was taken back by the fact that Izuku didn't seem too interested in why he was like he was. I have somewhere to be. Izuku said, as turned and headed to the rooftop access door and walked in. As he descended the stairs he couldn't help but think that Kei was right. He was a werewolf and tonight was the full moon, Izuku didn't feel like he was acting any differently. Who was he kidding? He threw his only friend against the wall, he chased after All Might. He thought he had a chance with the new pretty good in school. Things he would never think he would do before. Maybe he should just cancel the date. Izuku pulled out his phone that had miraculously stayed in his pocket during everything. He pulled up his texts with Kei and sent, "Hey, I need you to hack into our school database and get me Yaoyorozu's number." You don't already have it? Kei asked. No. Please can you just do it? Izuku begged. And what makes you think I'm able to do that? Kei sent back. I'm sorry for what I did early, I'm having an odd day. And you're right, something is going on with me and I need to cancel the date. Izuku said. I'm sorry that I was right. Kei sent and after a few seconds a contact info appeared, hacked the school network the day we got back, had her number since. To answer the question of why I sent her number so quickly. I hacked the school network the first day we got back and got her number. You're welcome. Kei said. Izuku could see the smile on Kei's face. Thanks. Izuku clicked on the phone number and it immediately started ringing. After 2 rings it picked up, hello this is Momo Yaoyorozu. Hello, Yaoyorozu. Izuku hated himself for not planning what he was going to say first. Oh hi Midoriya. I don't remember giving you my number. Momo said. Can I answer that question at a later time, please? Izuku begged. Sure. Are you calling to ask if I'm still good for our date? To which I am, I'm so excited to go to the party tonight. Momo said, bouncing up and down on her bed, which Izuku could hear the springs creaking. Her first chance of doing something that normal people did and with someone she genuinely felt good being around. About that. Izuku said, and he could hear Momo preparing to be dumped. Her face appeared in his face and he gritted his teeth. She was so appealing and he had a chance, he had made himself a promise. That if he ever had a chance to get a girlfriend he would take it no matter what. But he didn't know about werewolves. Kei said to keep his heart rate down, so maybe he could still go on his date if they just didn't go to the party. He sighed and said, would it be okay if we went something else? I just figured that you might have had a long week and you might not be all that excited about being in a large crowd late at night. Do you not want to be in a large crowd tonight? Momo asked. She sounded so ready to go to it, almost like she had never been to party with people her age. Izuku couldn't deny her that, not on a night like this. No, I'm fine. I love parties, I go to them all the time. Izuku said, hoping he sounded convincing. He couldn't tell if it was working. Well, I'm completely fine, and like I said I'm excited to go to the party. Meeting new people, making new friends. Momo said, talking to the most antisocial, hated meeting new people, and had only one friend for life kind of person. Izuku bit his tongue to try and make his mind clear. Thankfully it did and Izuku tried to talk himself out of date, which was the whole reason he called. Yet he couldn't bring himself to. Momo was appealing and the first person out of his mother and Kei and his father to treat him like a normal human being. Werewolves and everything be damned. Yeah, I was just calling to make sure you were still going for our date. I'll see you around 7 o'clock. Izuku said, his voice becoming joyful. Perfect. Momo said, then ended the call. Izuku stopped in his tracks, he had failed his mission. He stopped, turned and then rammed his forehead into the wall, cracking forming around the impact. Then he turned and pressed his back against the wall and slid down to the floor. Mission failed, we'll get them next time. Came from his phone. Izuku looked down and saw that it was a gift sent from Kei. You're a horrible person. Izuku sent. I know, luckily it doesn't keep me up at night. Kei sent. Toshinori gave Izuku a large window of time to walk away, lying to himself that he should give the kid his space. When in actuality Toshinori was too tired to move, so as he rested he kept a close eye on the bottles in his pockets. He still had to drop off the villain and once he was rested, he called his friend Detective Tsukachi and arranged for a pickup. Once the slime villain was in police custody, Toshinori hopped onto a train to head to his apartment. As he rode the train his mind went back to the conversation with Izuku, lycanthropy. It sounded like a medical disease, but one Toshinori had never heard of. Did Izuku have it or did one of his friends? And what made it so bad that it could potentially stop one from becoming a hero? Without being able to think of the Asmor himself, Toshinori turned to the one person that could answer it. Walking through the door of his apartment, Toshinori dialed the phone number to Principal Nizu. It quickly picked up and Toshinori heard Principal Nizu's voice, "Hello All Might, what can I do for you at such a time?" "Hello Nizu, I have an odd question for you. Earlier today I ran into an odd young man and he mentioned a medical term I am unfamiliar with. I thought you could tell me about it." Toshinori said as he walked over to the couch and sat down on it. "If it's medical, then we should have Recovery Girl weigh in on this conversation." Principal Nizu said, and after a few seconds the phone call turned into a conference call with Recovery Girl. "It's Friday, my time off started 2 hours ago, what is it?" Recovery Girl asked. Toshinori, please inform Recovery Girl of your question. Principal Nizu said, as if releasing the bulls and the only thing in their way was Toshinori. With Recovery Girl it sort of felt that way. "Hello Shuzenji." Toshinro said, as he put his phone on speaker and put it on the armrest of the couch, afraid that she would begin to yell at him. Toshinori. There was no warmth in Recovery Girl's voice, but at least she didn't yell, "Did you rip another stitch?" No, nothing like that. Toshinori could almost hear Recovery Girl release the pencil she was able to snap into two. "It's just that I ran into a young boy earlier today and he mentioned a medical disease I'm unfamiliar with. He called it lycanthropy and he made it sound like stopped someone from being a hero. So I was curious about it and wanted to know if it was treatable." Toshinori then noticed that neither Principal Nizu nor Recovery Girl had cut him off as they often did. Hello. Toshinori, did the boy state whether he had it or if a friend had it? Principal Nizu asked, his voice becoming a bit more serious than usual, making Toshinori look down at his phone. Unsure, but it was someone close to him. What is it? Do we need to call the CDC? Toshinori asked. It was serious enough to make two of the smartest people Toshinori knew to take a pause. Could it be deadly and needed to be stopped? Principal Nizu, you can't be serious. It is superstitious, lycanthropy doesn't exist, not even within our world of quirks. Recovery Girl said, even with all the weird quirks she saw and treated. It simply was not possible. We've always suspected that it could be possible. Maybe even older than quirks, and were myths that were thrown away as such. Principal Nizu said, breaking his calm persona a bit. If anyone was going to believe in the supernatural, it would be the animal with a quirk that made him act human. It's not real. Recovery Girl argued. It could be. Was Principal Nizu's rebuttal. It's not real. Recovery Girl argued. It could be. Was Principal Nizu's rebuttal. It doesn't exist, Recovery Girl argued. It could. Was Principal Nizu's rebuttal, and finally Recovery Girl screamed in a way that would get anyone admitted to a psych ward. You two are going to kill this old lady. Toshinori cleared his throat, getting their attention. Anyone care to fill me in with what lycanthropy is? Recovery Girl sighed, then said, lycanthropy is a medical term for when someone becomes a lycan. Otherwise a joke of when someone undergoes a transformation into a werewolf. Sounds like a quirk. Toshinori said. There were animal quirk all over the world, even the number 5 pro hero had a rabbit quirk. That is where you are wrong. Lycanthropy would be the step beyond a quirk. While someone with animal quirks can receive some animalistic instinct, someone with lycanthropy receives all animalistic instinct. Full integration. The urge to hunt, form a pack, kill. We're talking full werewolf, as in the supernatural kind. Recovery Girl said. As transformed on a full moon and kills everyone. Toshinori said, laughing a little at everything. Werewolves and the like weren't real, and it was most likely just someone that misunderstood their quirk. Yes. I knew someone that had a wolf quirk, and I asked them that question about their quirk and werewolves. While this man's family had wolf quirks since the dawn of quirk, not a single member was affected by the full moon. No heightened instincts, that is what sets a simple wolf quirk apart from werewolf, the amount the wolf part takes over. Principal Nizu said, I believe it would be best if you got closer to this boy and learned who they believe to be a werewolf. If it is a simple misunderstanding, there will be no reason to fear. But if werewolves are real, we have a real problem on our hands. How so? Toshinori asked. The only way to become a werewolf is through another werewolf. Only an alpha can make new betas, and if whoever you met doesn't already know about werewolves, then they're a beta, and wherever there's a beta, there is an alpha. And an alpha werewolf isn't going to be happy with just one beta. Principal Nizu said. Toshinori knew he needed to see izukumidoriya again. Yet how was he going to find a single boy in a city the size of Mizutofu? Izuku was sitting in the living room on the couch, looking out of the front window. As he waited for Momo to arrive, his knee had started to bounce. Today could not have happened, not for the obvious reasons that were about to arrive, but what had already happened. Izuku thought he could lie to himself, that he had managed to overpower the slime villain and save himself, but he was realistic. Maybe it was his quirk coming in. No, K was right, the chances of having such an abnormal quirk so different from his parents, it wasn't possible. And who had heard of quirk from the animal transformation that was controllable? Look at the rabbit hero Mirko, she couldn't turn on and off her quirk, her rabbit features were always there. Izuku heard his mom coming down the stairs and looked over at her. She gave him a sweet smile and said, I know she's a little late, honey, but you remember how hard it was for us to find this house at first. Izuku got a small smile as it was almost the dead of night when they finally found the house. I remember you were only a few minutes from pulling over and having us sleep in the car. So is this a date or a party? Inko asked, as she sat across from Izuku. A bit of both. Izuku said, a small blush appearing on his face like every time he thought of this as a date. Good. We don't have to have that talk, right? Inko said, staring and locking eyes with her son. Izuku immediately went red before he shook his head. Do we have to? No, I know you're not man enough to do something like that on a first date. You're too kind of a person. Inko said, and laughed as Izuku looked like he had swallowed his own tongue out of embarrassment. The sound of a car pulling up into the driveway stopped the conversation from going any further. Just have fun tonight, Izuku. Thanks, Mom. Izuku said, as he stood up from the couch, grabbing his jacket before heading over to the door. Turning the knob, Izuku walked out just in time to hear something about protection, and then Momo promptly got out of the car and slammed the car door shut. He's a respectable man, he won't do anything like that. Momo said, almost yelling. She then turned and saw Izuku standing on the front. She was wearing a brown shirt that went down to her mid-tight and black jeans covered the rest of her legs. She was holding a windbreaker jacket in her hand. As she locked eyes with Izuku, she went a little red and asked, "How much of that did you hear?" "Only what you just said." Izuku said, then saw Momo's father sitting in the car. He waved, "Good evening, Mr. Yaoyorozu." "Good evening, Midoriya. Keep those manners, they'll do you well," Mr. Yaoyorozu said, waving his hand out the window. Izuku looked back at Momo, but he sensed Mr. Yaoyorozu's eyes still on him. "Sorry I'm a little late, our car didn't know how to get to your house," Momo said, walking up the walkway and onto the porch. "My mom called it. We struggled when we first moved in," Izuku said, then waved again to Mr. Yaoyorozu. With that, Mr. Yaoyorozu pulled the car out of the driveway and slowly drove away. "So where is the party?" Momo asked, brushing her bang out from in front of her eye. Izuku's heart fluttered a bit. With a breath he managed to say, "At an old boathouse owned by Kaken's family." "Oh," Momo said. Izuku's house was always far out of town and she didn't look forward to the idea of walking back after the party. "Don't worry, it's not that far from here. Just a 10-minute walk," Izuku said, and Momo perked up at them. "We should be headed out, it will have started by the time we get out there." Momo smiled and nodded, then followed Izuku off the front porch and down the road in the opposite direction that her father had just driven away in. The music and lights of the party could be seen and heard far before either of them could see the actual boathouse. As they climbed over the last little hill, they saw a crowd that looked to be the whole graduating class of Aldria Middle School. The main party was held in the backyard of the boathouse, where lights had been streamed around and led down the docks where a few people were dancing. A table with food had been set up on the back porch and had a fog machine underneath it. "So this is how Mizutofu parties," Momo said, taking in the sight. "Have you never been to a party like this before?" Izuku asked, having to raise his voice a bit to be overheard by the music. "No. The ones I went to had more adults and more alcohol," Momo said, remembering all of the meetings her father had with other hunters the night before going out to hunt werewolves. Momo was always told to be in her room, but as she had started middle school, she was allowed to join in on just the meetings. Her father claiming she needed to know how to fight, as she would soon be joining them on their hunts. "I doubt that. One of those kegs is probably filled with alcohol, snuck in by someone," Izuku said, getting a small smile on his face as he did. He could smell the alcohol, and for a lightweight like himself and his heightened smell, that was enough to make him feel a little buzzed. "And you don't think you'll get caught by the police?" Momo said. Izuku chuckled a little as he opened the side gate to the backyard. "We'll be fine. My friend's dad is the chief." Izuku turned and held his hand out for Momo to take. "Come on, live a little." Momo had been sheltered more than other kids her age, beyond the claim she was being protected from the supernatural. Her parents made sure she grew up with proper manners and spoke as such, acting formal when she met new people and present a mature age. But now, just before she turned 15, she could act her age and unwind a bit. She smiled as she took Izuku's hand and he pulled her into the backyard. The music was loud, the lights were bright and the moon was full, but Momo sighed as she began to enjoy herself. She and Izuku danced a bit to the energetic music, just enjoying being in each other's presence. Izuku enjoyed the night, forgetting about what had happened after school. That was until he spotted Kuram Takeo leaned against the gate. Izuku locked eyes with him and tried to look away, but he could sense Kuram's eyes on him. Had he followed Izuku here, but what for? Izuku looked back at Kuram and the music started to fade. The world disappeared and the only thing Izuku could focus on was Kuram. And the rage started to build up in his chest, the same rage from when the slime villain tried to take over his body. Walking away from the food table, Izuku stumbled through the boathouse and made his way to the front yard. He couldn't see Kuram, but he could feel his presence. Then his eyes began to burn and Izuku felt his nails growing. He had to get out of here and away from Kuram and from Momo. Izuku looked up the road and then took off, running as fast as he could up the hill. Going faster than he had ever been, Izuku was back at his house within 3 minutes. Running upstairs, Izuku headed for the shower, and tried to cool his chest down, maybe to get the rage to go away. With a hollow breath, Izuku jumped into the shower and tried to calm himself down. The hot water only seemed to make his rage flare up. Yuku looked down at his hands and saw his nails grow into claws. Jumping out of the shower and heading over to the mirror, Izuku wiped the mirror down and saw his normally green eyes were glowing a bright yellow. Then he opened his mouth to gasp and saw that his canine teeth had grown to look like wolf fangs. Izuku ran from the bathroom and into his room. He changed into a new pair of pants and shirt, then suddenly a knock came from the door. As the door began to open, Izuku jumped over to close it, but a foot managed to slip in and keep it somewhat open. Midoriya. It was Kei. Izuku's panic lowered a bit. Kei, now's not the time. Izuku said, resting his head against the door. I came to help. I saw how you were acting at the party. The clouds were blocking the moonlight, but the moment you stepped into it, you started acting like you were drunk, and I know you weren't because your mother would kill you and then me. Kei said. Oh, the party. I left Momo at the party. You have to find her. Izuku said, banging his head against the door. She's fine. I saw her get a ride from the party. Kei said. Kei, it wasn't just the moonlight. I saw Kuram Takeo there. Takeo, he's the werewolf, he's the one that bit me. He's the one that killed the girl in the woods. Once I saw him at the party, I could feel his eyes on me, he must have been trying to get me to do something. Izuku said. Midoriya, we have a big problem then. Kei said, trying to push the door open again, but Izuku was still leaning against it. Takeo was the one that drove Momo away from the party. Suddenly Kei fell into Izuku's room, the door opening wide as there was no more resistance. As Kei picked himself up, he saw Izuku jumping out of his window and into the woods behind his house. Oh, we're in dig sh. Izuku landed on the ground and his rage exploded, but now it was more focused. Focus on finding Momo, protecting her from Kuram. Izuku felt his nails fully transformed in claws, his sight, hearing and smell were all heightened as Izuku raised his head and let out a howl. Then without waiting he began running to the forest. It would be the logical location for Kuram to take Momo. As Izuku ran he never once felt winded despite how fast he was running, and then the world seemed to slow down. He noticed more detail of things in his vision, he could hear the music at the party and he smelt Kuram waiting for him in the woods. Once the parking lot of the forest came into view, Izuku saw a black Camaro parked there. Looking through the windows, Izuku saw that it was empty, so he continued into the trees. Running along the path, following Momo's scent, Izuku didn't stop until he saw her jacket hanging off a branch. He ran up to it and pulled it off of the branch. Where is she? Izuku yelled, he knew Kuram was nearby. She's safe from you and the trouble that follows you. Kuram's voice echoed through the woods, making it hard for Izuku to tell which direction it was coming from. Suddenly Izuku was tackled from behind. Izuku tried to claw at Kuram, but then they rolled down a hill. Once they stopped rolling, Kuram picked up Izuku and slammed him against a tree. What did you do with her? Izuku said, trying to break free of Kuram's hold but couldn't. Quiet. Kuram said as he appeared to be listening for something. He must have got locked on as he looked down at Izuku and said, too late, they already found us. DMN, they're fast. If you want to not die, then run. Kuram then took off into the woods, leaving Izuku behind. Izuku wasn't going to believe Kuram, but then he heard several pairs of feet running towards him. Izuku pushed off from the tree and took off in the direction opposite of Kurama. But he didn't get very far before something hit the tree in front of him and went off like fireworks. Izuku covered his eyes as the bright light blinded his enhanced sight. Blinded, Izuku stumbled into a tree, and before he could run off around, an arrow went through his arm and pinned his arm to the tree. Izuku let out a cry as he looked up and saw several men slowly walking towards him. Izuku focused on the one closest to him and couldn't believe his eyes. It was Mr. Yaoyorozu, Momo's father. What was he going out in the forest in the middle of the night with a crossbow? Take him. Izuku heard him say. Yet before any of the men took another step forwards, Kuram appeared behind them and took off their feet. Then Kuram disappeared from sight, only to quickly appear next to Izuku. He grabbed a hold of the arrow and broke, then pulled Izuku's arm along it until it was free. Izuku yelled from the panic, but stopped when Kuram grabbed Izuku's shoulder and pulled himself into the woods. Izuku followed Kei through the woods, his mind trying to make sense of everything that had happened. As Izuku ran he felt his arm heal and suddenly the pain was gone. After a few minutes, Kuram slowed down and Izuku stopped, and felt winded for the first time in a week. Then he looked up at Kuram. With a growl Izuku shouldered Kuram to the ground. Where is she? Izuku said, trying to kick Kuram in the chest. Kuram effortlessly dodged and got to his feet. However, before he could say anything Izuku attacked again. Kuram easily caught Izuku's left hand and when he saw how brightly Izuku's eyes were glowing and how he had his right hand to attack, he said, "She's safe. I drove her home, I took her jacket to lure you here. And since that was clearly enough, I left her out of this. How can I trust you?" Izuku asked, trying to break out of Kuram's grip. "You just have to take my word for now. Call her in the morning, but for your sake and her safety it would be best if you stop trying to get close with her," Kuram said as he let go of Izuku's hand. "And who were they?" Izuku asked. "Hunters. A glide of people since medieval times that have hunted werewolves, us. And they will stop at nothing to kill us. It doesn't matter who we are, or whether we've killed people. They see us, the same way pro-heroes see villains. The other difference, pro-heroes use killing as a last resort, the hunters use it as a first resort," Kuram said. "Us, you mean you. You're the one that bit me," Izuku said, getting ready to attack. Kuram's eyes suddenly glowed blue and Izuku felt his eyes start to burn a bit. Only an alpha can turn people into werewolves and alpha has red eyes. Besides, Midoriya is really that bad. You can hear better, see better, are more powerful that brat from your middle school, Katsuki Bakugo," Kuram said, towering over Izuku. "You've been given something that people would kill for. Because being a werewolf is better than having a quirk." Izuku scoffed. "From your view, you're better off than you were before," Kuram sighed. Izuku knew Kuram was calling him a quirkless worthless person, he heard all the time at school. Now with a werewolf's rage behind him, Izuku couldn't control himself and tried to attack Kuram again. Kuram effortlessly dodged and said, "Alright, sensitive topic. But I meant it. Quirks are single points powers. The bite is a gift since it proves with more power than a single quirk could give you. I mean it, if you tried to fight anyone, chances are you would win, it doesn't matter what kind of quirk that they have." "What about All Might?" Izuku asked. There was nothing in the world that could defeat the number one hero. Kuram paused for a second. "Alright, he's an exception and he is for most things. Being a werewolf gives you enhanced speed, strength, and healing, and more than just that. There is no quirk out there that can do all that to the same level we can. You speak like quirks and being a werewolf are two separate things," Izuku said. "They are. If someone with a quirk is bitten they lose their quirk, before the werewolf genetic overpower their quirk. But the power they receive is more than their quirk could ever be," Kuram said. "Well, I don't want to be a werewolf," Izuku said, as he leaned against the tree. "You will. And if you still want to be a pro-hero, then you're going to need me to teach you how to control it," Kuram said. "How did you know I wanted to be a pro-hero?" Izuku asked, but he received an answer before Kuram said anything. "You've been stalking me since Tuesday," Kuram said, then began walking away. "We're brother now Midoriya, so don't think I won't be able to find you." Izuku sighed as he watched Kuram walk away. He had been right, Izuku was stronger and faster, and now that he had a chance to think about it, that sense gave him a small feeling that maybe he had a chance to become a pro hero. But what about the hunters? They hunted werewolves and they would come after Izuku, even if he called his power a quirk. Izuku pushed off the tree and headed home. As he walked down the road away from the forest, Izuku saw Kei riding his bike up to him. Once Kei reached his friend, he stopped and swung his legs off and began walking alongside Izuku. "So how did it go?" Kei asked like he was a high school girl asking for gossip. "Poorly, but you know the thing that worries me the most," Izuku said. "If you say Yaoyorozu, I'm actually going to punch you in the pages," Kei said, and he meant it. It was the only thing Izuku seemed to focus on for the last week. "Momo probably hates me now," Izuku said as he hung his head low and resigned to be punched by Kei. "First name basis, oh. But hey, I don't think you have to worry about that so much," Kei said, deciding his friend was already depressed enough he didn't need to be hit. "What makes you so sure about that?" Izuku asked. "I may or may not have biked to her house to talk to her mom. Turns out Yaoyorozu was just in her room. Apparently Takeo said he was your cousin and you had asked him to drive her home since you were feeling sick. I don't think I could have come up with that lie that good, but you still better come up with an amazing apology. Or tell her the truth," Kei offered, "and then you'll be able to revel in the awesomeness that you're a freaking werewolf." Izuku shook his head. "No, I saw her dad tonight in the woods. Takeo called him a hunter, said he was a part of a group of people that's been hunting werewolves for centuries." "Okay, bad idea then. Moreover, are you sure you still want to date Yaoyorozu with that risk at hand?" Kei asked, and then saw that Izuku was still deeply in love with Momo despite everything. "Okay then, we'll get through this together. Come on, if I have to, I'll chain you up in my room every full moon and feed you live mice." "I'd rather not," Izuku said, nearly gagging at the thought of that. "Well, I am not going to be wasting steak on you." Kei laughed and Izuku chuckled a bit. Kei put a hand on Izuku's shoulder and said, "Come on, you wanted this year to be different." "Yeah, but I didn't see this happening," Izuku said. "True. And who knows, super strength was an ability of medieval werewolves. If you learn to control it, then maybe you have a shot at UA's hero course. And that way you won't have to join me in general," Kei said, slapping Izuku's back. The two boys walked back to Izuku's house, where Kei bid him farewell, then biked to his own house. Izuku walked his friend's bike away for a bit, then headed inside the house. He stumbled up the stairs and barely made it to his room and fell on his bed before he fell asleep. That night he dreamed of the werewolf monster that bit him and gave him these powers. Yet it wasn't Kuram, then who else was it? Maybe Kuram knew. Izuku woke up the next morning as the sun came through his window. He yawned as he rubbed the sleep on his eyes when he felt something prick his forehead. He withdrew his hands and saw that his nails were claws. He let out a defeat sigh. This was his life now and it had been forced upon him. Then again, it might not be so bad. Kuram had explained that by being werewolf Izuku he would have more power than any quirk could. Meaning he could be stronger than Bakugo and he could join Momo in becoming a pro hero. Izuku panicked as he remembered Momo and how he had just left her behind. Izuku jumped out of bed and grabbed his phone. He quickly dialed Momo's number and prayed to whatever deity had been cruel to him his entire life, that just this once they would be cared for and Izuku would save this relationship. The line connected and Izuku held it up to his ear, but before he could say a word, Momo said, "Good morning Midoriya." She still sounded half asleep. "Hey Yaoyorozu, I didn't wake you up did I?" Izuku asked, as that would not help his case. "No, I think I accidentally have some spiked punch, meaning I'm hungover," Momo said and Izuku couldn't help but chuckle a bit. "I did warn but I called to say I'm sorry. I didn't mean to leave you behind at the party," Izuku said. Kei said that Momo said that Kuram said he was sick. Maybe Izuku could play off of that. Midoriya, this might just be the alcohol still talking, but I really like you. And maybe if the party had happened at the beginning of the week, I wouldn't have picked up. But I've learned a lot about you over the week and I think you're a nice guy. So if you're going to go with the stupid excuse of being sick your cousin gave, I'm going to stop you. Momo said, let out a long exhale. Would you still like me if I did? Izuku said, and Momo huffed, then I won't. Just know it was a personal family matter. With it just being my mom and I, we've come to support each other a lot. I'm happy to hear that Midoriya. Momo said then hiccuped a bit. Izuku paused as he gave thanks to God, then he said, Yaoyorozu, it shows like you're really hungover. I'm good. This is the first time, but I know what to do. Drink plenty of water and eat carbohydrates. I'm not as saintly as my parents think. Momo said, as she rolled over and grabbed the water bottle she had filled from the kitchen before either of her parents had woken up. She was sure neither of them would be too happy about her drinking alcohol, even if it was unknowingly. Well, I hope you feel better and I'm happy to have a chance to make everything up to you. Izuku said as he walked out of his room and headed to the bathroom to shower. I'll let you know if your chances are still strong once I feel better, Momo said, then ended the call. As she tossed her phone onto her nightstand, a knock came from her door. Yeah. Hey Mo. It was her father, and Momo immediately sat up in bed, just seeing if you're awake. I'm headed into the office, while your mom goes get some groceries. Are you still in bed? Her father said from the other side of the door. Yeah. I guess I partied a little hard last night. I don't think I've ever felt this tired. Momo said, trying her best to make her words not sound so slurred. Well, we're happy that you're making friends. But what about that Midoriya kid? Mr. Yaoyorozu asked. Before her father could accuse Izuku of anything, Momo came to his defense. He just called. Said he had a family emergency, and since it's just him and his mom they're really close. Oh, it's good to hear he's a family man. Well, I'm going to head out, hope you get better. Soon. Mr. Yaoyorozu said, then Momo heard his footsteps disappearing. Momo sighed and flopped back down on her bed, at least it was the weekend. After showering and getting dressed, Izuku headed out of the house. After the week he needed a chance to think. So with only his keys in hand, Izuku locked the front door and headed out. He had no destination in mind, he just walked. As he walked he thought about how his life had changed in less than a week. In less than a week, his chance of having the life he trained up as a kid seems more possible than ever. He was a werewolf, and that came with all sorts of perks. But then there was the massive downside, he wasn't acting like himself. He was getting anger easier and to a greater degree, and he had been able to control it. He was lashing down and eventually, that was going to hurt people, those closest to him. And then there was Mr. Yaoyorozu and his guild. If Izuku was lucky, Momo didn't know what her father did. If she did, Izuku didn't want to think about what would happen if she learned his newest secret. Would she be forced to kill him, or would she do so willingly? Only seeing the werewolf and not Izuku. Was it worth taking that risk? He was already this deep, maybe it was best to see how deep he could do. Izuku took a deep breath and then realized where he was. Takoba Beach was once a place for locals and tourists to come and enjoy the sand and setting sand. But now it was just a trash dump, the current pulling in trash from the ocean. It was the perfect place to describe Izuku's life now. He had potential, but it was covered by so much stuff it might be possible that it never saw the light of day. Izuku hopped over the guard railing and landed on the sandy beach. He disappeared from view, as he walked through the different trash pile. Then he stopped at one and climbed up it, only stopping at the top and sitting down on a broken chair. He just breathed as he looked out at the nearly fully risen sun. Even with the good turn his life seemed to be taking, Izuku could only wish his life was as simple as it felt as he watched the sun. He stayed looking at the sun until he heard footsteps, though Izuku didn't move as he recognized the footsteps. He just waited until Kei walked into view. Kei walked in front of the trash pile Izuku was now, but he didn't turn around, he just looked out at the sun. "How did you find me?" Izuku asked. "You weren't answering your phone and we used to come here as kids. And since all this." Kei gestured around him, "This seemed like a good spot where you won't be bothered by what did she say? Giving you a second chance or?" "Yeah." Izuku said, a little breathless. "That's good, right? If you're lucky, you will be going steady, so when you leave for UA, you'll still be able to call her." Kei said. "No. She's going to UA. At least it would make sense, with her quirk." Izuku said. "Oh, you know her quirk. What did you have to do to learn that?" Kei said, teasing Izuku. "Nothing. She told me. Her quirk is creation, she can make any inorganic material from the lipids in her body." Izuku said, as he leaned forward and looked down at Kei. "Lipids, that explains why she's so toned. That's a quirk in itself, being able to stay skinny no matter what you eat." Kei chuckled, then turned back and looked up at Izuku. "I guess that means you'll be having the same goal as her. You'll be boyfriend and girlfriend before you are even in high school." Izuku smiled at that thought. "Yeah, but what am I going to do about her dad? I mean, I haven't told Momo that I'm quirkless and I could pass off being a werewolf as my quirk. But then he's always going to be watching me, seeing if I'm lying or not. I think part of that is, did he recognize you? You said you saw him last night in the woods, did he see you and enough to recognize you?" Kei said as he began to climb the trash pile. "I don't think so. Otherwise, I suspect my front door would have been kicked down." Izuku said. "True, and then there is the question of Lacrosse. You're probably good at dodging Bakugo at school, but during practice and games, he has free reign. And he's going to be enemy number one of raising your pulse and making you angry." Kei said as he leaned down on a flattened cardboard box. "But that's Lacrosse. It's a pretty violent game, you remember how much it took to convince my mom to let me play." Izuku said. "Yeah, I thought for our first game you were going to show up covered in bubble wrap. And if it comes to it, you can always quit, before you make it too violent by killing someone." Kei then showed a brief flare of anger as he raised his fists. He clicked his tongue and lowered his arms. "You're going to hate me. Our first game is in a week and if you don't have control, you won't be able to play. But I'm first line and Coach Yuto is impressed. If I bow out, I'll be pulled and never have a chance to play again. Worse, Kaken will never shut up about that." Izuku said, "Always imagine the torment he would receive at the hands of Bakugo if only 2 weeks after being made first line, he was cut. Then I guess this week is going to be very important for you. We'll have to see what helps you keep control." Kei said, as he picked up a bottle cap and hurled it into a different pile. "We?" Izuku asked. "Dude, we're brothers, like I said, I have to live vicariously through you. And the last thing I want to happen is you get arrested for killing someone then being killed by some hunters." Kei said as he slapped Izuku's shoulder, "Come, we've got practice in an hour." Izuku reached for his phone, then remembered he left it at the house. Kei pulled out his phone and showed Izuku the time. He didn't realize he had been at the beach for so long. "Come on, after practice we can head to my place and play some games. Maybe strategize how to keep you from going all bloodthirsty." Kei said, as he stood up and then began making his way down the trash pile. Walking every step so he didn't slip, when he reached the top Izuku suddenly landed next to him. Izuku's feet sunk a bit into the sand while kicking up some into a dust cloud. "Whoa!" Izuku said, feeling his heart race a bit from the adrenaline he was feeling. "Cool." Kei just shook his head and the two of them left to get to practice. At practice, Kei was on the bench again, watching Izuku as he tore through their teammates and scored point after point. But with each point Izuku made, Bakugo made sure to match it. Then practice switched from matches to drills. It eventually came to blocked shots and just everyone's luck Bakugo was the defender. He made sure no one got past him as he trucked everyone to the ground. Then it was Izuku's turn. He picked the ball up in his net and stared down at Bakugo. Bakugo growled as he dug his foot into the ground. "Come on Deku, let's see what you've got," Bakugo said, baiting Izuku. Showing this was going to be the hardest Bakugo had ever hit him in practice. Coach Yuto blew his whistle and Izuku took off. He tore down the field and as he reached Bakugo, he tried to dodge. But Bakugo was too fast. Izuku suspected he used his quirk a bit, as Bakugo's shoulder came ramming Izuku's chest. Izuku was pushed away and hit the ground, falling onto his back. Coach Yuto blew his whistler twice, as Izuku rolled over onto his hands and knees. Coach Yuto walked over to Izuku and crouched down. "I think that is the slowest I've ever seen someone run. My grandma could run faster than that and she's dead. You don't want to be slower than a corpse, do you? Midoriya?" Izuku knew that Coach Yuto was just trying to egg him now, but it did nothing. But as Izuku looked up he saw Bakugo grinning at him. The same sh2t eating grin he had ever since he gained his quirk and Izuku didn't. Even since then, Bakugo seems to have made it his mission to always knock Izuku back down into the dirt. But now Izuku just stood his ground, more than that he could fight back. It was time Izuku repaid the favor. "Another go, I want another go," Izuku said as the only thing he could imagine was bulldozing through Bakugo. "Yeah, that's what I want to hear," Coach Yuto said then stood up. "Alright, Midoriya has earned a redo." Bakugo laughed as Izuku got to his feet. "The same thing is just going to happen, but now I'm really going to make this F123 king hurt. You should learn how useless you are and stay on the ground." Izuku heard all of it and it just made his anger grow. Kei was right, there was no better person than Bakugo that could make Izuku angry. Izuku walked back to the line and picked up another ball. He won't go too far, just make it past Bakugo and show how strong he is. Yet as Bakugo got ready and shifted his feet against the ground, Izuku could only think about the years of torment he suffered because of the Ash Blonde's inferiority complex. Coach Yuto blew his whistle and a small growl formed in Izuku's throat. With all of his strength, Izuku charged forward and saw Bakugo was ready for him. Yet Izuku didn't care as he shoulder-checked Bakugo, breaking through his lacrosse stick. Bakugo flew back about and hit the ground, while Izuku charged forward. Only to fall to his knees a few feet later. As it was clear both were injured, the whole team ran forward. Everyone went to Bakugo, while only Kei went to Izuku. Izuku was on his hands and knees, breathing heavily, and when Kei crouched down he saw Izuku's eyes growing yellow. And his teeth were forming into fangs. "Midoriya," Kei said, but Izuku didn't respond. "Izuku? I can't control it, not now," Izuku said as he tried to control his breathing. Yet his chest was burning and he felt his whole body responding to it. "Really?" Kei said, as if he was done with everything. "Dmn it, at least we had the forethought of this happening. Come with me." Kei helped Izuku stand up and they rushed over to the changing rooms. As they ran, Kei noticed Kuram and Shota glare at him, blaming him for everything and warning him not to get involved. When they reached the changing rooms, Kei pushed Izuku in and then locked the door behind him. "Alright, we're clear," Kei said as he turned and looked at Izuku. Izuku was hunched over and his whole body was moving as he breathed. Kei ran over and crouched down in front of Izuku. He had to stop his best friend. "It's alright. It's just us. Get away from me," Izuku yelled as his eyes shined brightly and his teeth became sharper. Kei quickly fell back and moved across the floor. Izuku roared as he jumped onto the locker and looked down at Kei. The urge to kill was high and Izuku couldn't see his best friend, only a thing to kill. Izuku lunged at Kei, who expertly timed his dodge and disappeared behind more lockers. Izuku got back on top of the lockers and looked around for Kei. The smell of the room was too strong and Kei was dead silent. Until Izuku heard the squeak of a shoe and he lunged at it. He hit the ground and rolled, only to raise his head and be immediately hit in the head by a fire extinguisher. He was hit 2 more times, before falling backwards. "You good?" Kei asked, but Izuku just growled as the cut on his forehead healed. "Okay then." Kei pulled the pin and pressed the trigger. Freezing CO2 came out and dosed Izuku, who continued to roar and fight against the cold. Once the roaring stopped, Kei released the trigger. He looked down and saw a shivering Izuku. "We good?" "What happened?" Izuku asked as he shook the frost out of his hair. "The same thing Bakugo tries to do to you every day. You tried to kill me." Kei said as he shouldered the fire extinguisher. "I'm starting to think that the better option would just try to get Bakugo off the team. But you know better than I do that is never going to happen." "I can't believe that happened." Izuku let out a massive breath and dropped his head. He thought he could control it, but something about Bakugo was making him want to attack the ash blonde. Did the werewolf side of Izuku want to prove itself, and Bakugo was who Izuku saw as the best? "Hey, we knew something like this was possible, but this is why we have to work together. Until you learn control," Kei said as he dropped to his knees. "What about Kaken?" Izuku said. They might butt heads, but Izuku didn't want to hurt him. Something that Kei wished Bakugo would see, instead of thinking that Izuku was looking down on him. "You pushed him pretty hard enough that you broke right through his stick. With our luck, he's injured and will be out for the week. But when he gets back, he'll pay back hell on you," Kei said. "Thanks for the weather forecast," Izuku said as he held out an arm. Kei told Izuku's arm and helped haul him to his feet. "Your place, games." "Yeah," Kei said. Putting a hand over each other's shoulder, the two friends walked out of the locker room, but not before grabbing their bags. Once outside they headed away from the field. An ambulance had arrived and they were loading Bakugo up, who was yelling and cursing that he was good and still about to play. As they walked down the hill, Kei didn't mention seeing Kurian standing and looking down at them. That was something that Izuku didn't need to be bothered with. They walked to Kei's house and his father was out on duty, so they had the house to themselves. While Kei disappeared up into his room, Izuku changed into the guest room, finding his lacrosse gloves had holes in the fingertips now. He sighed as he knew he would have to play with them until he could afford a new pair. He tossed all his gear into his bag and then slipped into a new shirt. He zipped up his bag and then tossed it over his shoulder and headed out to the living room. Kei was already on the couch, with a controller in his hand and looking over his library of games. "I'm thinking we can make sandwiches for dinner, we've got lunch meat that is about to go bad." Izuku didn't agree or disagree, he just flopped down on the couch with a huff. Selecting Super Hero Brawl 15, Deluxe Edition, Kei handed Izuku his remote. "You know the rules. You don't get All Might and I don't get Edge Shot." "Yeah, but usually you break that rule first," Izuku said as he powered on his controller and the game entered into the menu. For the next few hours, the two of them jumped from game to game, just enjoying each other's company. As the evening began, they had both become hungry enough to make the effort to get off the couch. Pausing the game, Izuku and Kei headed to the kitchen to make dinner. Kei grabbed the lunch meat out of the refrigerator, along with lettuce and condiments, while Izuku headed into the pantry to grab the beard. They stood on the opposite side of the island and made their stations. Kei put on the mayo and mustard while Izuku put on the lettuce and then meat. "So you want the good news or the bad news?" Kei asked. "Whichever one came first," Izuku asked as he put the top slice of beard onto the second-to-last sandwich. "Bad news, Bakugo's shoulders were hurt, nearly dislocated. Doctors say that due to his quirk, his shoulders are stronger and were able to withstand the blow. Good news, Bakugo has been benched from practice until next Wednesday, then Coach Yuto will see if he's good enough to play. And with our luck and Bakugo's stubbornness, he'll play." Kei said, then looked up. "Coach Yuto said so in the group." Izuku raised his head as he finished the sandwich and wondered why Kei hadn't finished his sentence. Izuku saw the worry on Kei's face. Had Bakugo arrived and was ready to cream both of them? Izuku then noticed that Kei's right hand drifted over to the butter knife he was previously using and was now gripping it tightly. Okay, not Bakugo, Kei would have had a completely different reaction than grabbing a knife. Izuku wasn't able to form his next thought, as a hand grabbed the back of his shirt and pulled him into the wall. Izuku tried to free himself but weight was pressed into the middle of his back. You shifted, right in front of everyone. Any one of them could have seen you, then they would have come after you, and then me. Not just the hunters, everyone. Pro-heroes, the police, out of fear, villain because they would want out power. Kuram said, his voice dipping with anger. Then he turned to Kei, who had somehow found the strength to walk towards Kuram, weakly holding the butter knife out in front him. You don't. Is that a butter knife? Maybe, Kei said as he looked at the butte knife in his hand. Maybe not the best weapon to use against a werewolf, the least it could be was silver. Okay, it was the closest thing to me. Now do you mean putting my friend down? Not until he thinks how serious this is. Kuram said, then turned back to Izuku, the best course you can do is run away. Withdraw from Lacrosse, from school, everything, and come with me. Not until you learn to control it, and with the way you've been acting today, that not going to happen anything soon. You've been following me? Izuku asked. Ever since you left your house. And if you even think about playing next Saturday, I'll kill you myself. Kuram said, then released Izuku from the wall. Izuku fell and turned around, just in time to see Kuram walk out the front door. We've really to work on your control if you want to play Saturday. Kei said, as he walked over and stood next to Izuku. Then I suggest we get to work. Izuku said as he pushed himself up. Kuram thought it was going to be impossible for Izuku to learn control, and Izuku now wanted nothing more but to prove him wrong. And the best at proving people wrong was Kei. After eating dinner, Izuku and Kei set about figuring out the best way for Izuku to learn to control his anger. They worked all of the evening and all of Sunday, yet nothing worked. Nothing in the sense of Izuku being able to control his anger, but the fact that he and Kei struggled to get Izuku angry. They did everything from Izuku thinking of Bakugo and his different insults to Kei straight up punching Izuku in the nose. That got Izuku's anger up a bit, but nothing that a normal person couldn't handle. Sunday ended with Kei admitting defeat and flopping down on his bed and saying, well, I don't know about you, but I feel perfectly at peace. Didn't realize I had so much anger to release. Haha, you're worse at holding grudges than I am. Izuku said, as he grabbed his wallet and phone, I'll see you at school tomorrow. Kei waved goodbye without sitting up and Izuku left to go back to his house. They didn't see each other until they met in front of Aldria Middle School. They converse a bit before heading inside. While Izuku didn't mean to hurt Bakugo, it did have the unforeseen effect of Bakugo not terrorizing him. Bakugo never approached him or said anything to him, never acknowledged him. Izuku could say that he preferred this over the usual. Yet it seemed that everything Bakugo was holding back came out after school. While everyone was changing into their gear, Izuku was talking to Coach Yuto. What do you mean that you won't be able to play on Saturday? With Bakugo out of commission, the whole team is going to be relying on you. Coach Yuto said. I mean, I can't play the game on Saturday. Izuku said, having already said this 3 times before. You mean, can't wait to play the game on Saturday? Coach Yuto questioned if he wasn't hearing Izuku correctly. No, I mean I can't play. Unable to. I'm having some personal issues. Izuku said. Coach Yuto paused as Izuku was the last person he thought would do this. You don't mean you're shooting for the other team? What? Izuku was confused by what Coach Yuto said, then realized, no. No on both accounts. It's okay if you are. Our goalie is gay. Coach Yuto. Izuku let out a long breath. Coach Yuto was the second last person he would want to have any talk like that with. I am aware, and no, I am no gay. I just can't play the game on Saturday. Well, is it DRGS? No, your mother would kill you if it was that. Coach Yuto said, and Izuku knew his mother would be happy if her stance on DRGS was so well known that even Coach Yuto knew it. Whatever it is, Midoriya, understand that becoming first line, playing first line is taking the responsibility of being first line. You're the first to practice and the last to leave, while everyone else is at home playing video games and whatnot. You're out training. Sharpening your skills, hone them to a point until they become a deadly weapon. A weapon to use against the other teams. And if you can't shoulder that responsibility, then you don't get to play. You're back on the bench until you're ready. Now, do you want to play or do you want to sit on the bench? Izuku wanted so badly to play, to somehow that he was someone. That despite being called worthless because he didn't have a quirk, he could see amount to something. He gripped his hand tightly from the stress, then exhausted. I'll tell you Wednesday. Good, you are starting to see the responsibility of being first line. I hope you make the right choice. Coach Yuto said. Izuku turned and walked into the changing room. Where he was greeted by the whole team. Would you look at that, the worthless Deku, thinking just because he made first line he's the best. He thinks we need his help to win Saturday, but says he is unavailable but plans to make a dramatic entrance at the last minute and win us the game. Bakugo said as he tightened his protective gear, when you get through your thick skull, you mean nothing, Deku. Not to this team, not to the world. We don't need your help in the game, and don't think that even if you magically be available, that I'll let you play. Bakugo took a step forward, but then Kei appeared next to Izuku. Bakugo, surprised that you're in gear, especially since coach benched you until Wednesday. Now you won't want to disrespect coach, lest he also benches you for the game. He always takes our health and safety as priority number one. Bakugo scoffed but didn't remove his gear. He just walked to Izuku and hit him with his shoulder. Now I see why MS Look at Me likes you. She's almost as pathetic as you. Izuku's eyes began to shine a bit, as his chest heated up and he turned to look at Bakugo. Izuku could take Bakugo's insult, he had been for years now and was always immune to them, but now that Bakugo was throwing insults at Momo. A person Izuku called a friend and had no place in their feud. Izuku clenched his fists tightly as a growl began to build in his throat, and he noticed that Kei looked ready to act. But then Izuku realized that he didn't need to stand for Momo. She was a powerful woman, and if she ever heard Bakugo insult her. Izuku held back a smile as he imagined Momo being more than willing to prove whether she was a hunter or not. Bakugo noticed the change of look in Izuku's eyes and just scoffed. Bakugo left the changing room and the team left with him, leaving only Izuku and Kei in the room. Kei held a fist out towards the door the team had left through, but then sighed and turned back to Izuku, who was getting changed. Any anger? Kei asked. A bit, Kaken insulting Yaoyorozu. I think that's what triggered it. Izuku said as he slipped on his protective gear. His phone went off and he pulled it out. It was a text from Inko. Got the night off, excited to see you play. Can't wait. Well, I'm dead. Izuku said as he turned his phone off and put it in his locker. My mom got the night off, now I have to play. Then Takeo will kill you. Maybe he's just kidding. Kei said as he leaned against the locker. Come on, we've got all week to figure this out. You'll learn to control your wolf side and you'll cream the other team and prove Bakugo wrong. I just hope I have my camera ready. Izuku chuckled a bit, then finished up getting dressed. He and Kei walked out of the changing room, where Momo was waiting for them. I'll wait for you on the field. Kei said, then walked away. Yeah. Izuku said, then turned to Momo. Hi. How are you feeling? Better since Saturday? Yeah, I don't think my parents caught on. Are you busy? Momo asked as she brushed her bang out in front of her face. No, it's just Kei. It's nothing. I'm never too busy for you. Izuku said as he and Momo began walking towards the field. I think I like the sound of that. I have to run, but I wanted you to know that I'm coming to watch you play on Saturday. Then we're going on a double date, with Bakugo and Mio. Momo said. Izuku said as it was going great until Bagwo was mentioned. Going on a double date with Bakugo and Mio, that was only to end up in a disaster. Clearly, Mio had been the one to agree to it and was dragging Bakugo along. "Please, it will give me a chance to show you off to him and tell him how wrong he is about you," Momo said, taking Izuku's hand. Izuku didn't need to feel his chest to know his heart was beating faster. He took a deep breath and said, "What did you have in mind?" "Arcade," Momo said, and Izuku thought about how he had a chance. As he knew for a fact he was better at arcade than Bakugo ever could be. If it turned into a contest of wins or tickets, Izuku would easily win. "Yeah, it sounds perfect," Izuku said, thinking that Bakugo would never show up and Mio would just cancel. Then he and Momo could go on their date alone, and after he had won the game, that would be the perfect way to end the night. Momo nodded and let go of Izuku's hand, allowing him to head over to the team. Practice went by swimming. As Bakugo was benched and under the threat of being benched for the game, Izuku didn't have to deal with him. Once practice was done, Izuku spent some extra time shooting into the goal with Kei being goalie. This gave off the presence that he was training extra, while in truth he just wanted to not have to deal with the team while he changed. After Izuku and Kei changed, they headed to the mall as Izuku needed to get a nice shirt for his date. Actually, Kei demanded it of him, as Izuku's wardrobe consisted of an all-might t-shirt and plain t-shirts with kanji on them. After being forced to try on several different shirts, Izuku and Kei were able to agree on a dark green collared shirt. Izuku paid for the shirt, and as they headed through the exit, he turned to Kei, "Since when did you consider yourself to have fashion sense?" "Simple, I listened to what Mrs. Bakugo always pointed out to her husband of what looked good," Kei said. Then he looked up and noticed a man walking past a mall security guard. He checked his watch, then suddenly pulled out a gun and fired into the air. The security guard tried to withdraw his own gun, but the man quickly pistol-whipped the security guard. The security guard was knocked unconscious and the speaker playing music cut out. "There is no need to panic, we have taken over the mall, and if everyone listens then no one gets hurt. The hero and police have chosen not to listen to reason, so we are going to make them see our side." A rough voice called through the speakers, "Throughout the mall are my associates, each armed and dangerous, we won't want to give any reason for them to act reactively. Just stay where you are, sit or stand your choice, but at this moment each one of you are our hostages." With the thugs' attention elsewhere, Kei pulled Izuku and they hid behind a tree. Kei pulled out his phone and saw that he had no service, so there went the plan of calling his dad. "Midoriya, do you hear an alarm?" Kei said as he turned to Izuku. "What?" "A security alarm coming from the security room. A mall like this isn't going to have a silent alarm," Kei said, as he looked through the tree and watched the thug. Izuku closed his eyes, he could sense everyone's panic. They all fear getting shot and killed, to serve as a pedestal for a villain's sermon. He could hear quiet breaths, the radio going off and parents comforting their kids. Yet no alarm. "No, I don't hear anything," Izuku said. "That means one of them has to be in the security room, disabled the alarm and is being the lookout. Best way to keep track of everyone in a building this size. If I could get to the security room, I could restart the system and get word out to the police," Kei said as he looked around and spotted a security door. "It would make it easier to move around, Midoriya, security door." Kei nodded to the door and Izuku looked over it. Izuku then looked back at Kei and saw that he had a key ready. "Wait, Kei." Yet Kei dashed over to the door and inserted his key. Once Kei felt his quirk take hold of the key and transform it, Kei turned the key and opened the door. He rushed inside and knew Izuku was right behind him. After Kei silently closed the door, they both let out a breath neither of them realized they were holding. "Come on, that was just step 2, Kei said and began running towards the security room, with Izuku running behind him. They soon arrived at the security room and Kei looked through the window. On the other side were several monitors and a man dressed in jeans and a plaid shirt with a bulletproof vest over it. Kei looked down and saw the unconscious guard lying on the floor. "It's just one guy, I think he's the leader," Kei said as he turned away from the window. Great, what's your plan to knock him out? Izuku said. Time to use some of that werewolf speed of yours. I unlocked the door and you rushed in and knocked him out. Kei said as he silently inserted a key into the lock. Izuku quickened his breath a bit, as he had learned that was the best way to get his werewolf side to activate. The only reason he had come along with Kei was to try and keep him out of trouble, but that was no longer going to happen. You're enjoying this a bit too much. Maybe, Kei said, then pulled the door open. Izuku didn't give the villain a chance to react, as he rushed in and rammed both of his knees into the man's chest. The villain fell back and slammed against the desk. The villain quickly withdrew his gun and shot Izuku. Izuku felt the bullet hit his shoulder, and that made his anger explode. His eyes shined bright and his teeth and hands transformed as he roared. Izuku saw his reflection. In one of the monitors his face had changed too, his eyebrows were sharp and angled, and he had grown some sideburns. Izuku turned back to the villain and could smell the fear coming from him. In the hell are you? The villain demanded, but Izuku didn't respond. He just took a step forward and knocked the villain out. As the villain fell to the ground, Izuku let out a small growl and his body transformed a bit back. His face looked normal but his cannibals were still sharp and his nails were still claws. He let out a pained growl as the pain in his shoulder grew a bit, but then it suddenly stopped and the bullet was pushed out of his shoulder and fell to the ground. Kei quickly came into the room and took the chair the villain was previously sitting in. He pulled up the security system and began letting his quirk work its way through the system. As he did this, the villain's radio sparked and a voice came through. Hades, you still there? Since there was no answer, Hades, are you still there? Someone took him out. Move to plan B. A second voice said. Kei looked up at the monitor and saw that all of the thugs had their guns or quirks aimed at innocent civilians. Izuku noticed it and his eyes shone a bit. He couldn't just let those thugs hurt innocent people. CRP, Kei said, then his quirk took hold and his finger began tapping on the keyboard. With the press of enter, Kei was in the system. I'm in the system. We've got 15 thugs and are all ready to harm people. He looked over the monitors and then pulled toward the door. We've got 2 thugs close to each other, 50 yards in that direction. How quickly could you knock them out? I don't know, Izuku said as he assumed as fast as he had run from the party back to his house, so pretty quickly. He looked over the monitor and noticed some he recognized, All Might. There was no mistaking his true form. Izuku quickly pulled out his phone and looked up a video. Kei, the moment I take out the first thugs, I want you to turn on the speakers and hit play. Izuku tossed Kei his phone and Kei looked at the video. What? Do you plan on taking them all out and want some hype? No, to send a message. Izuku said, then he turned to the door. He stepped over the unconscious guard and heard the door Kei pointed out. He quietly turned the knob and looked out. The closest thug was only 10 yards away and the second one was 40. Izuku would have to act quickly. Izuku tried to make himself angry, to shift and to save anyone. But no thoughts could make him angry. Then he looked up and saw the fear the hostages faced, and heat started forming in his chest. Izuku would not going to allow innocents to be hurt if he could do anything about that. Izuku's teeth and hands transformed, while his eyes glowed. Then with a growl, Izuku dashed out of the hallway. Izuku jumped up and rammed his knee into the first thug's back. The moment the thugs hit the ground, Izuku pulled the hostage away. The second thugs noticed and pointed his gun towards Izuku. Then the speakers sparked and Kei said, to all those villains, we make a message. Fear not, citizen. Why? Because I am here. Izuku smiled as All Might's voice and laugh echoed through them all. Izuku saw the fear in the thug's eyes, but then he pulled the trigger. Izuku quickly dodged out of the way and then took off towards the thug. The thug fired 3 more times, but then Izuku planted his fist into the villain's gut. The villain fell to the ground but managed to keep a hold of his gun, which he quickly pointed at Izuku. Izuku flinched a bit but then he felt a presence behind him. you villain should know it best to surrender when I am here. The thug pulled the trigger, but All Might quickly moved in front of Izuku and the bullet bounded off of his chest. Then the thug passed out from panic and fear. All Might laughed, then he turned and looked at Izuku, young Midoriya. Fancy see you here, yet if you are here, then who play my debut video? That would be my friend K in the security room, Izuku said. Ha, I will need to have talk with you and your friend about being vigilant. And you will have to talk to the police. All Might said. Izuku's shoulders troubled and his body relaxed, his werewolf features disappeared. All Might then leaned down and whispered, do not be distraught, you handled the situation quite well, but we will discuss that when we have more privacy. Izuku nodded, then followed All Might to the security room where they collected K and the unconscious villain. The police had arrived and All Might handed all of the thugs and their leader over. The officer in charge thanked All Might then gestured to Izuku and K, what are they doing? They played a small hand in keeping everyone safe. And as it was only a small part, I thought I could handle taking charge for them. All Might said. Izuku and K looked at each other, holding back their smiles. They weren't going to get in trouble, however, I will make sure they learn their lessons and see to it that they make it home. Izuku and K became distraught, they knew having a talking to with the #1 hero wasn't going to be that much fun. All Might walked behind them and grabbed their shirts, now if you excuse me. K began to panic, unsure of what was able to happen, while Izuku gained a bit of a grin. All Might crouched down a bit, then jumped off into the horizon. Landing on a rooftop, All Might set the two boys down, then while K worked to keep his lunch down, Izuku turned to All Might, I think you're good, K won't say anything. All Might nodded, he needed to get close to Izuku, and have him trust him and the best way to do that was to trust his opinion. All Might's body began to relax and then deflated in a cloud of smoke. Toshinori spat out a bit of BLD and said, how did you know to play my debut video? I saw you on one of the monitors. If people thought All Might had arrived, you would know it was time to act. Sorry if that put you on the spot. Izuku said as he rubbed the back of his head. It's quite alright, I was simply waiting for an opportunity to act. Knowing that the villain was no longer watching the monitors, I knew I was good. And the only way someone could know All Might was there, was if they knew me. Toshinori said. I can't believe we just helped All Might save the day. Kei said, then turned around. Since when had the skeleton arrived and how did Izuku know him, where's All Might? Izuku pointed to Toshinori who waved. It was obvious Kei didn't believe his friend, so Toshinro buffed up and then immediately transformed back, imposter. No, even if someone could make themselves look like All Might, there's no way anyone could copy his strength. With that, Kei fell to the ground, well, it's nice to meet you. Yagi Toshinori. Toshinori introduced himself then he turned to Izuku, young Midoriya, I've been meaning to speak with you again. About lycanthropy. Kei snapped his attention to Izuku and said, you told him. I thought we agreed that the fewer people that knew the better. It kind of slipped out. Izuku said, looking highly embarrassed. Kei shrugged his shoulders and then sighed, well who better to trust the #1 hero. Seeing that the two of them could get into an argument Toshinori cleared his throat then said, before we get to that, we need to discuss what happened back there. The two boys looked ready to defend themselves, but Toshinori didn't give them a chance, yes you were able to help and played a part in saving everyone. However, if I had not been there or if young Midoriya did not know who I was, the result could have ended quite differently. Kei thought about it for a second, while he had planned to trip the silent alarm the guards were onto them before he had the chance. Kei sighed then said, he's right, they were onto us and were ready to kill people. People they could have killed before the police had a chance to arrive. And it's only thanks to All Might I wasn't killed. Izuku said as his shoulders dropped. Seeing that the boys saw the error of their way, Toshinori didn't feel the need to hound them any move. I'm glad you understand that. Now young Midoriya, lycanthropy, werewolves. You brought it, but failed to mention it while it pertained to you or a close friend. Given that I now know what you mean and I have seen more of your quirk, I understand it pertains to you. It's not a quirk. Kei interrupted Toshinori. Young Kei, there are many cases of people not understanding their quirks, believing it to be supernatural or from a cult-like figure. And with young Midoriya imagination. Toshinori sighed. It's not a quirk. Izuku interrupted Toshinori. Young Midoriya. Toshinori sighed. Miruko. Cow Lady, Hawks, Godzilla, Gang Orga and all other mutant-type quirks. None of them can turn on and off their quirks, their animalistic features are permanent. Kei said. Ryukyu. Toshinori countered as he had given the argument between Principal Nizu and Recovery Girl some thought. Transformation quirk and that one is the world, practically. Kei said. So young Midoriya has a transformation quirk, know that works in stages and he can control it. Toshinori said. Kei held up a hand and lifted a finger. 1. No transformation quirk can do that, none have ever been recorded. 2. Neither of Midoriya's parents has a quirk that allows them to become werewolves. 3rd, if it was a quirk, why did Midoriya only get it within the last 2 weeks? Being that of a late bloomer isn't possible. 4th, I'm pretty sure if a doctor tested Izuku's BLD, they wouldn't find any quirk factor. We can't prove that as we don't have the equipment to do so. Toshinori had to think about all Kei said, there were answers that worked for each argument but none worked for all of them, so. Werewolves do in fact exist and my friend is one of them. Kei said while Izuku said, it's true, I don't have a quirk. And I am a werewolf. After Friday and a full moon there was no question about it. Toshinori pinched the bridge of his nose, this was not how he wanted the conversation to go. He was really hoping that it would be Izuku misunderstanding his quirk but with everything laid out in front of him. Then a thought entered into Toshinori's mind, Izuku was technically quirkless and with how he had acted, he had the heart of a true hero. He was perfect to receive one for all, he had acted with fear and was more than ready to try and save everyone. He was smart and quickly came up with a plan that only had a small chance of working but it still worked. Toshinori had come to Muzutafu and gotten a job at UA to find a successor for One for All. Yet standing in front of him was a better option, instead of having a group of people to pick the best out of. Toshinori had the chance to mold Izuku Midoriya into the perfect successor for One for All. A young boy who clearly wanted nothing more than to become a hero. Toshinori stood tall and looked down at Izuku, young Midoriya, you have a heart that I have not seen in a long time. A heart of a true hero, you risked yourself to save others, never stopping to learn about yourself. You trust in your friend, looking to him for help, something that not many heroes can bring themselves to do. So if you will accept, I will help train you to become a pro hero and when the day comes I will pass my quirk on to you. Izuku was starstruck, to be trained by the #1 hero. This was the best thing to happen to him, but then Kei had to stick a needle into his balloon. Excuse, but what do you mean by, I will pass my quirk on to you? Quirks can't be handed from one to another, it doesn't work like that. Quirks are genetic and only show themselves in the host's original body. You have a great understanding of quirk theory, but my quirk is not like any other, it is called One for All. It is like a torch that can be passed between generations and with each new user, it becomes stronger. Its purpose is to bring light to all and keep this world in the light of peace. Toshinori said. Right. Kei said, not believing in the #1 hero. I don't care. Even if you can't pass your quirk to me or not, I will accept your training. To be trained by the #1 hero, the symbol of peace. I accept. Izuku said as he stood up. No second guessing, no doubting, it was not the time for that. Izuku was being handed a gift he never thought he would get and he was not going to throw it away. Excellent. Now if you still feel the same way, meet me at Takoba Beach Saturday. Toshinori said, then began walking away. Hold it. Kei said and Toshinori stopped from the power in Kei's voice, we have a game on Saturday night, one we can't miss. So we will meet you at Takoba Beach on Sunday, after lunch. And I will be joining. I'm not going to leave my best friend alone in something like this. Toshinori then fell flat a bit. One for all was the biggest secret in the world. Only the users and a trusted few were supposed to know. Yet he had just talked about it in front of someone he didn't fully know. Yet if Izuku was to inherit it, it was clear he would reveal it to Kei. And it helped that within Kei, Toshinori saw a bit of his mentor Gran Torino. I accept. Takoba Beach Sunday, between noon and 1. Toshinori said, then he transformed into All Might and jumped away. Please make your safely back to your homes. Kei said as he stood up and turned to Izuku. He had noticed how angry his friend seemed when attacking the thugs. Like all he could think about was attacking them, so he asked, how do you feel? Like changing? Izuku fell to the ground. No panic. I feel panic. I have a chance to be trained by the #1 hero in the world, and the only way I'm calm is thinking that this will help me save people in the future. Izuku said, blanking, staring at the wall. For the past 2 weeks, Izuku could never dream of something like this. As much as he thought this was a dream, he knew it had to be true. The world had broken him down so many times and now it was finally giving him all the good luck it had held back. Remember, before you can think about training to become a hero, first you have to learn how to control your emotions. Kei said, as he held out his hand and Izuku accepted it. Kei hauled Izuku to his feet. Come on. You've got your shirt, let's head home and get to work. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author D3 Miles art on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.